Hello, everyone. Welcome, as always, to Ludohistory, and welcome back. This setup means we are playing God of War Ragnarok today, and we've got very special guests today. First, as always, coming in over the power of the internet, we've got Red and Blue from Overly Sarcastic Productions joining us, as
Hello.
always, for these. And
Howdy.
So,
then our this is the first time with this wave of streams of having a guest on, right? Last week was our re-premiere, and our first guest of our very special wave of specialty Norse lit experts is Basil Arnold Price, a PhD candidate at the University of York who specializes in doing queer and post-colonial readings of the Icelandic sagas. He recently edited, was it Medieval Mobilities for Palgrave Macmillan, and has previous published on Beowulf, Old Norse sagas, and a little bit of monsters and like grave mounts and ritual work in those. So done a bunch of things, but I am so excited to have you on, Basil.
woo.
Oh, no, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here, and I'm really excited to be playing God of War with you guys.
Yes, good.
Yes. Right, so some guess the stuff they do is pretty easy, right? We had Dr. Declan Taggart on in December explaining do work on Thor, pretty easy. The work you do, a little bit harder to explain. Do you want to translate
Yeah.
Sab as to what texts you like to work with?
Yeah, so in some ways, I sort of feel like I'm a fake Viking expert. I don't work on Vikings. I work on
As the best of us do.
Yeah, exactly. I work on medieval Icelandic literature from the 13th, 14th, and 15th centuries, with a particular focus on kind of political expression within these texts. So I'm really interested in the ways in which these texts imagine kind of political and social alternatives to the kind of real world. And sometimes that's looking at the ways in which these texts imagine monsters. Sometimes that's looking at the ways in which these texts imagine magical spaces like Greenland, or
The Sapmi.
or Vinland.
Yeah.
Greenland's not a real place. Don't worry.
Don't worry about
I
it.
can't
Yep,
hurt you.
they're fake.
So yeah, I kind of work on a really wide range of texts, and I work on a really wide range of kind of different aspects of texts. I'm kind of a generalist in that regard, even though I really only work on 14 very late, very understudied texts. But my first love is in many ways the Poetic Edda, and particularly the heroic parts of the Poetic Edda.
Oh,
So
heck yeah.
Yeah.
the Saga the Volsungs, Brynhildr, Gufrun, Sigurd Fafnisbani. And that was something that I really loved when I played the first God of War way back when, the first of the kind of new
Norse
waves of
yeah.
God of War. Yeah, God of War. And so I'm really excited to see how those kinds of aspects are taken up again in Ragnarok.
Yeah, I'm so excited, and heroic corpus fans. We're gonna have some Helgi Hundingsvani and Sigrun the Valkyrie coming up pretty early in the stream. So get hyped for that.
Very
Boy.
exciting.
Yes. But first, before we get into the game, there are a couple of announcements. Firstly, if you are enjoying this and have not yet, do make sure you hit that follow button to be notified for this and all future streams. I get a wide array of guests on, in addition to my own work. We've got a freaking stacked lineup in this next week for new games. Let's see, coming out on Tuesday is both Inclinati, the medieval marginalia tactics game, and an upcoming game called Seasons: A Tale for the Future, where we play as an archivist on the end of the world, and I am ridiculously excited for both of those. Additionally, though, we are going to have a book historian on Ali Alvis this time next week to play Pentiment and talk about all the bookishness of that game. So I hope you are all excited for those, and if you are, make sure you hit that follow button. Additionally, if you want to support the channel more, do make sure you hit that subscribe button. If you have an Amazon Prime account, you have a Twitch Gaming or a Prime Gaming sub, which is one free subscription every month, no questions asked, which you can apply to this channel in order to get access to ad-free viewing, theoretically, a bunch of special goodies, and some of the best emotes on Twitch, because those are all actual marginalia from actual manuscripts all over the medieval and early modern world. Lastly, as you watch, you are going to be accumulating channel points. You can see it up in the community challenge right now. There is a challenge to make me cosplay as Andreas Mahler from the game Pentiment. It is exactly as fun as it sounds. I am looking forward to this so much. So, as you accumulate those, there's a whole bunch of fun things you can make us do. But if you want to donate the daily tithe to that, we highly encourage it. Now, without further ado, let's get into God of War Ragnarok.
Great. I'll be right back. I need to go fold some croissant dough.
Yeah!
I'm so sorry.
Speaking of channel points, Zoe Alden is telling us to pay attention to our good health by hailing hydrate.
Yes, I've got, what's everybody drinking? I've got some lovely milk oolong tea that actually Red's not here to hear it, but she got me as a gift. Which is very lovely, and I've been making it quite a lot since she first gave it to me a couple weeks back.
Incredible. I have lemon ginger tea because I was talking a lot at work today, so we are being kind to my throat.
I am extremely underhydrated, and I am just a desiccated mummy right now.
Oh no.
So if I just fall over dead, you know why.
Yep. You fail to hail hydrate, and that is entirely a personal problem.
Yep.
All right. And
All
Wolfie,
right.
by the way, Wolfie1066, thank you for the 5 community gifted subs. That does mean that we are close to a hype train. Cheering bits or subscribing will help trigger a hype train for even more exclusive emote unlocks.
I've lost myself.
Like, figure out how bits work.
Oh, also, I am realizing the game audio looks pretty well balanced, which is great. We love that.
That leads you to yourself.
And
You would have me accept my fate.
well, where we are in the game, that's probably important. Tyr and Freya are arguing with each other because
Not your purpose.
everyone bullied Atreus into making the bad decision of going to Asgard and joining forces with Odin, the main antagonist of the game, which is a problem.
Not a great move.
Exactly. To help fix this and figure out what the heck they're supposed to do next, Kratos and Freya are going to head over to Midgardr in order to go talk to the Norns. Which is not their best decision either, to be honest. But I'm sure nothing bad will happen and there will not be any complications.
Yeah, as we know from the sagas, knowing one's fate from the Norns usually doesn't work out very well. And this is something that I find so exciting about Norse mythology, is that unlike gods in most other pantheons, the Norse gods know how this all ends. And I don't know if that's something that you guys have talked about on the stream so far, but it's something that I find so interesting, is that it's a society, or really a kind of divinity, that knows that its end is nigh. And it's all about trying to stop it. But always when you read these stories, you know that you can't stop it. It's never in question that Ragnarok is going to happen, that it's going to stop, it's going to come, and the world will end. And it's interesting to see this kind of trickle down into the very, very personal stories that get told in the Middle Ages, where you have something like Gisli Saga, which I don't know if you've talked about on the stream. But
we have not talked about that particular one.
Well, Gisli Saga is great, and it's short, which is very good. And the really cool thing about Gisli Saga are you have these two dream women, the good dream lady and the bad dream lady. And they weave the fate of Gisli with intestines and guts. And I'll just spoilers, but learning his fate does not help Gisli. So I'm a little bit worried about our quest to go learn our fate, because I don't think it's going to turn out so well for us. And I don't think the Norns are particularly pleasant.
I have so much to say about this section of the game.
We will see some crossover with relevant examples in Greek mythology, but I think, Basil, to your point, one of the most interesting things about the Norse canon, in my mind, is the notion that not only do these characters know how this ends, they know the end is coming, but it permeates every aspect of the storytelling. Like, there are all these stories that, like, on paper have nothing to do with Ragnarok, But
Yeah.
that awareness is always there. Like in the Greek pantheon, in the Greek mythology, there are all these stories that involve prophecy and this and that, and you're gonna bang your mom no matter
Yeah.
what you do. Sorry, buddy, that's just how the dice
Yeah,
roll.
yeah.
But those are all very localized, specific, individual. But here it's just
It's the world.
it's everywhere. It's everything.
It's the world.
Everyone's aware. Like one way or another, we're screwed.
Also, correct me if I'm wrong. I feel like in the Lokasena, one of the like when Loki's just insulting everybody, some of them involve like, yeah, you're fated to die in Ragnarok this way, idiot. And it's like, wow, this is just the dinner table conversation in this pantheon.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great. I think it's part of the reason that that's used as an insult in Lokasena. And Lokasena is a poem where Loki insults everyone, but it's specifically very gendered insults. If you look at someone like Freya, the accusation against her is that she's sex crazed, that she's sex mad. And that's because the kind of within the sort of gender ideologies of the Poetic Edda and the mythological poems in particular, and maybe Norse society more generally, kind of overly sexual womanhood is seen as a perversion of womanhood. So that insult to her is meant to shame her and meant to shame her womanhood. But at the same time, when we have these insults about, oh, you're going to die this way in Ragnarok, oh, you're going to fail in this particular way, I think it's partially because you're failing to stop Ragnarok. And I think it's a great shame for Odin that he can't solve this problem.
Yeah.
Along with him being a nasty witch, but like that's kind of a sidebar.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's also. I was maybe gonna pivot a little bit to Odin, but that's a fantastic angle of his character that we learned a little bit of in the last stream, seeing him and Atreus interact, where this awareness of Ragnarok and this quest for knowledge, because we always hear like, oh, Odin, he seeks out knowledge, he hanged himself to learn things, and it's like do we need to investigate that at all? But this Odin is tormented by this knowledge, and he doesn't really show it, but you can see in his actions and what he does and what he wants that this weighs extraordinarily heavily on him.
Yeah. I think that is definitely part of this. Oh, dogs.
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 Your boys.
Oh my god, they're so cute.
Dogs.
They are cute.
Their fur is
I'm so happy we get to pet the dogs.
They are wolves.
Oh, are we in a sled? Oh, I'm so excited.
Actually, I think we have to walk over here to open the gate first, but then we'll get to sled. But Kratos is not very good at taking care of the doggos. Atreus did all of that work. Atreus did all of that work, and Atreus is not here right now.
Kratos has never had a pet in his life, and he's not about to start now. But I also feel like Kratos has the energy of like those dads that are like, oh, I don't want a pet, and then like the kid gets a pet, and the dad's like, this is my new son. I've only had him for a day and a half, but if anything happened to him, I'd kill everyone in this room and then myself.
Yes.
I have to say, I'm a little bit disappointed that I'm not seeing Freya's sled driven by cats.
True.
We could have had it all.
I know.
I don't think that's in I haven't seen that in the game yet, and I'm significantly farther ahead. So
Freya Cat Sled DLC when Sony Santa Monica give us what we want.
True.
The people demand it.
That'll be the microtransaction for this game, is you can switch all the wolves into cats.
You know I'd pay for it.
It's
Oh,
like
yeah,
how
totally.
some games have like an arachnophobia mode where it's like instead of giant spiders, it's cats. It's like, yeah.
No. Death can have me when it earns me.
Yeah, I think sorry, I'm going back to the Odin thing.
Please.
I think that kind of idea that he's really, really tortured by this knowledge is actually in many ways a kind of a really like insightful view on his character throughout the Poetic Edda, because the poems of the Poetic Edda often take the form of wisdom contests where Odin is trying desperately to learn something that will prevent this horrible thing from happening. And he never succeeds, but this is his kind of eternal struggle throughout the Poetic Edda. So yeah, I mean, I think that kind of torturedness of Odin is definitely kind of integral to his character, at least as depicted in the Poetic Edda.
Which is interesting because the way he's kind of framed in the Poetic Edda, he's more often than not like in control of whatever situation he's in. You know, they do they don't shy away from him being like, I am, here's a list of my 800 badass epithets and what they mean and how many ways I can mess you up. And
Yeah.
the fact that his like main thing is like going out into the world in disguise, you know, interacting
Yeah.
with it, learning new things. I've always found Odin a very interesting, you know, head god, if that's, you know, truly the
Yeah.
archetype he's meant to fulfill, because, you know, most of them are sort of Zeus-alikes. You
Yeah.
know, a big sky father. Not to go full, you know, Proto-Indo-European Reconstructionism or whatever. It's just
Yeah.
like there are trends that you can notice, and
Yeah.
it's like
Yeah.
these guys are large and in charge, and they're frequently the parent of a large chunk of the pantheon, and they might not
Yeah,
be
yeah.
infallible. You know, if it's not a sky father or like a sun deity, it's something similar. And they almost always stay very separate from the world unless they're, well, you know, Zeus has this weird little niche thing where his main thing is he creates heroes, and then those heroes go out and change the world. And of course, the way
Yeah.
he creates those heroes is bad, but you know, the point is, like, Zeus's thing is he spawns off the people who found all those city-states and, you know, slay all those monsters, which is kind of unique by, you know, Skyfather head god standards. You know, Ra doesn't exactly go around doing that stuff. But Odin is in this weird place where when he comes down to interact with the world, it's A, solely for his own gain, and B, in disguise as mortals. Or other
Yeah.
weird things.
Usually, yeah.
Yeah.
Right, there's randomly and arbitrarily killing Sigmundur as sort of a
Yeah.
particularly exceptional example of that. And usually, basically when saga heroes sort of call him out on being Odin, then he freaks out. In Hervarar Saga, one of my personal favorites, right, there's like the most Tolkien-esque riddle contest, and he's in disguise, and he asks King Heiðrekkr a bunch of questions, and then at the end of it, Heiðrekkr's like, wait a minute, you're Odin, and pulls out the cursed sword Tyrving and nearly kills Odin. According to
Wow.
that, the reason why hawks have short tails is because Heiðrekkr cut off Odin's tail feathers when he transformed into the guise of a hawk to escape.
Wow.
Yeah. The problem is that sword, that's actually Odin winning, because
Yeah,
that
Tyrfing's
sword
a-
is cursed, so once you unsheath the sword, you have to kill
You have
somebody.
to kill somebody with it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Tyrfing
And if-
is nasty.
No one's around, it's going to be the closest person. The closest person was Heiðrekkir's youngest son.
Yep, there it is.
Yup.
Always how it goes.
Always how it goes.
I should do a thing about different wacky swords.
Wacky swords
There's
are
so
good.
many. They're so wacky, especially in Norse mythology. There's like 5 million of them.
Because I think the only sword myth you've done is Kusanagi, but
Yeah.
there are plenty of others.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do see a question from Peter asking, Adam, Basil, tell me, how do relationships with a Valkyrie go in the sagas? I bet it ends great. We're
Badly.
getting a little bit of backstory in-game of Mir talking about having had the hots for Sigrun back in the day.
I mean, who wouldn't?
Yeah.
Fair.
Yeah, I mean, are you like me and you like your women hot and mean? Well, I've got good news. Valkyries. Yeah, probably the most famous Valkyrie is Brynhildr, who famously has a relationship with Sigurd Fafnisbani, Sigurd Fafnersbane. It does not go well.
No.
Volsunga Saga and the latter half of the Poetic Edda, the heroics poems, are all about how bad it goes. It
This
involves
is the What's Opera Doc
cannibalism.
one, I think.
It's,
Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, it is exactly the What's Opera Doc one. That's that's based off of Wagner's adaptation,
Yep.
The Ring, Der Ring of the Nibelungenlied, which is the Southern German. We call it the Southern tradition because it's German, and clearly Germany is the South. If you're coming from Iceland,
Everything's
You know,
relative, baby.
It's not wrong.
Yeah?
Where's
and
the lie?
there's a Northern tradition as well, and the Northern tradition of the Volsunga legend is included in the Poetic Edda, like I said, and Volsunga Saga, and it kind of floats through some of the Fornaldir Sogar and Islandiga Sogar as well. Yeah, relationships with Valkyries do not go well, and one of my favorite moments in Volsunga Saga is Brynhildr saying to Sigurd, who is... So Sigurd is trying to persuade Brynhilde to leave her husband and come away with him. And she says, "It's not fated for us to be together. I am a shield maiden." And it's just a really beautiful, like, short moment in a very bad saga before it really, really, like, all kicks off and goes into shit. So I guess the short answer to a very long, rambling answer is it goes badly. Usually an entire dynasty ends up dead, and even the gods get involved.
That does seem like the reasonable outcome of trying to flirt with what is technically like a mini death goddess, you know? Like, oh yeah, it's my duty to take fallen warriors off to the halls of Valhalla. You know what I should definitely do? Hook up with a living guy. That sounds fine.
Yep.
That aspect of, at least in the Volsunga saga, that aspect of the Valkyrie as choosers of the slain isn't really emphasized very much. We get this idea that Brynhildr is a shield maiden, and that she has never been defeated in battle. And actually, her kind of, the reason that she is laying in a tower for Sigurd to find her is because she was too good at battling. And Odin was like, I am going to curse you to never again win a battle. You will be a wife and mother.
Oh, Odin, you asshole.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Do
bad.
not reinforce the gender binary, Brunhilde.
Also,
Exactly.
is a fun case where the Poetic Edda and Volsunga Saga don't agree, because the same moment in the Poetic Edda in Sigurd Dreifumal actually does have Sigurd Dreifa be much more of the chooser of the slain, giving victory to the wrong person, and that's the justification versus being too good at battling.
Yeah. It's really, really interesting to see the kind of different ways in which these mythological characters that we think of being as really, really stable, like, we have them in this kind of concrete, fossilized form when we read an English adaptation of the Poetic Edda or a text on, like, Norse myths. We have this idea that they're really, really stable, but they're really, really not. The kind of Odin that appears in the sagas feels really different than the Odin that appears in the Poetic Edda. And that Odin also feels really, really different from the Odin that's in the Volsunga saga. Like, these are not stable characters. There's sort of archetypical features that are there. Like, you kind of know, oh, Odin's tricky, oh, he does disguises, but that is kind of the only thing that's stable. In the same way that these Valkyries that are shield maidens, that's really, really stable. But there's other aspects of them that are much less stable.
Yeah.
And again, that's something I find really interesting about mythology generally, is that it's unstable.
By the
Yeah,
way,
it's wild.
one audience clarification question. Right, you've thrown out a couple of genre terms. Right, the Fornaldarsögur and the Islendingasögur. Well, these are important terms for a lot of our conversations. So it may be worth taking a moment here to explain. In general terms, what text do we mean when we are talking about those?
Yeah, sorry. I got carried away.
It happens.
So, yeah. When we talk about Old Norse literature, which is what I work on, we tend to talk about two different kinds of texts. We tend to talk about prose, and we tend to talk about poetry. Poetry can also get further disentangled into kind of two general genres, which is Eddic, kind of mythological poetry, and some other stuff as well. Giants and trolls tend to speak in Eddic verses, so do undead creatures. And then we have skaldic poetry, which is the poetry that is composed within the courts of Norwegian kings. Often it's praise poetry, called draupa. A draupa is a praise poem. And then we have prose. And now, prose is a hot mess. There's a lot of it. There's a lot of it, and it's all very different. When we're talking about literature, I'm specifically talking about genres of saga. Saga, I'm sure if this has come up on the stream, I'm just going to say it again because I don't know what's been covered. Saga comes from the verb seia, comes from the noun saga, meaning to say, to tell. A saga is just a telling.
It is broken.
And there's a lot of different kinds of sagas. So I specifically work on Islendingasögur, which means sagas of Icelanders. They're sometimes called family sagas. They're stories about exceptional, badass, awesome Icelanders. Or in my case, since I work on later Islendingasögur, about pathetic, useless, terrible Icelanders.
Yeah.
Svartdale Saga, my beloved.
Yes, exactly. Svartdale Saga, Finnboya Sagarama, lots of useless, terrible men in these sagas. But there's a lot of other kinds of sagas, including Konungasogur, sagas of kings, mostly Norwegian kings. The last one written is in 1262, 1264, right around the time that Iceland ceases to be independent and is taken over by the Kingdom of Norway. And these are sort of histories of Norwegian kings. And then there's also Fornaldarsogur, which I've mentioned a few times, which are literally sagas of the long ago times.
Yep.
And a lot of the kind of mythological details that we get that are not in the poetic corpus are in these Fornaldarsogur. So Volsunga Saga, which I mentioned a few times as well, which is kind of the prose adaptation of the heroic parts of the Eddic poetry corpus, that is a Fornaldarsogur. Volsunga Saga is a Fornaldarsogur. We also have Samtidiasogur, same time sagas, contemporary sagas.
They're what I do.
They're what Adam does. They're extremely boring.
Hey.
By saga standards?
Devastating.
Oh my god.
Look, if you want to know all the sordid details of just how terrible of a person Snorri Sturluson is,
Yeah,
you
there you
read
go.
the contemporary sagas. Otherwise, there's not a whole lot going for them.
The contemporary sagas are great because they give us a lot of historical details, and they do let us know what a terrible person Snorri was. And there's occasional house burnings, which is quite fun.
The way
Uh,
you still speak of secrets.
It has the best moment in Icelandic literature. It also has the worst moments in Icelandic literature. Truly the duality of sagas.
That can mean so
Truly.
many things.
It's not somebody's
And
life,
then we also have
Norns use it to
Lusingasogar,
run away
which
with
means
outside
lying
well.
sagas, which are fairy tales essentially, or folk tales.
They're called
there's-
lying?
Yeah, this is the
Yeah.
this is the only saga term that dates to the Middle Ages. Because in the King Saga, the saga of King Sverrir of Norway, he specifically says that these lisur, these lying sagas, are good entertainment.
like
Devastating.
Wow.
being inside your own mind.
Exactly.
That's funny.
People have been arguing about what text he meant when he said lying sagas for 800 years.
Yeah, it's the kind of thing that makes like 19th century German academics' heads go like explode.
Yeah, it's like,
the
wait,
gesture
which ones
to-
of these are lies?
Yeah,
what
exactly.
did you know, sir?
Imagining then that like he's got this big library with 2 bookshelves, and one of them is like sagas of what my family did that is indisputable truth, and then another shelf that says the bullshit.
Well, that's why they call it a library.
Ah.
Anyway.
Boo.
Yeah, so there's a lot of different kinds of sagas out there, is the long and short of it. And for our purposes, for talking about Norse mythology, the Fornalda Saga are probably the most useful.
Wow.
Yeah. But in our poetry, the side quest we're doing right now is further proof that Sigurd's whole family is a goddamn mess. Because this is not about This is not about Sigurd the Dragon Killer. This is about his cousin.
Oh yes, the unrelated Sigurd. I guess the slightly related Sigurd.
No, this is. We're gonna hear about the Valkyrie. In this case, Valkyrie Queen, though in practice just a Valkyrie. Sigrid, and her love affair with King Helgi, the killer of Hunding, who is the person who kills Sigurd's dad.
Boy, whole lot of murder in this family tree.
There's
Yeah.
nothing but murder in this family tree. This family tree is like 84% murder.
It's not a happy family. I mean, none of these families are happy in the sagas. What's that? Is it a Chekhov quote that every happy family is the
Tolstoy.
same, but every unhappy Tolstoy? Thank you. Every unhappy family is different.
Yeah.
It's gotta be buck wild being like a normal family in this area. It's like, oh, you hear what happened to the Sigurds down the lane? No, what's going on? Oh, you know. Sigurd ran off with some Valkyrie he found in a tower, and then they both died. Wow.
There was
the
a
reason
magic
that-
potion involved, it sucked.
You coming round for game night this evening? Oh, I don't know. That Fafnir's moved into town, and I don't like the look he's giving my gold. Like, there had to be some normal people, right? Like, it can't have all been drama.
Yeah, they all get introduced. There was a man named such and such, and they leave the saga at the end of that chapter.
Perfect. Shout out to those guys. Staying in their lane, you know, crops flourishing, skin clear.
I mean, honestly, you get so many references to, there was a man named Thorkel. Thorkel had a good farm. Anyway, moving on, Gregor killed 6 men at the ball game when he was 7.
Yeah.
Anyway, moving on, and it's like, okay, wait, hold on.
Yeah, Thorkel and his farmhand stood over this area, took a look at this, and was like, this is gonna go badly for everyone, and then leave. And then the saga describes exactly how it goes badly for everyone.
And then a ghost moved in and started killing people, and 90% of everybody who was sensible went, fuck this, and left.
Exactly.
Anyway, here's the idiot who volunteered to go back in.
So, this is me trying to, like, desperately look at God of War. What... Desperately. And I know that, like, fighting Valkyries was a big part of the 2018 God of War, and I vaguely remember fighting Droiger and dragons as well. What have you been fighting only gods? What have you been doing in God of War? Like, what
A lot of just, like, random things that you kill
like
between...
that,
Like
what
this
the hell
thing.
is that?
This thing is a centaur? Don't
Oh,
worry
yes,
about it.
a centaur in Norse
Yeah,
mythology.
it felt bad that we didn't.
We-
have
we've
a
actually
first
found
skull
one.
in the
We-
Norse duology.
We found...
I was gonna say,
we-
Elk Frovi, right?
but besides Elfro, we actually found a visual reference from a, like, Iron Age thing from Sweden.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. Oh,
But
hell,
yeah,
I'm
they
super
kind
good
of just
at that.
populated the overworld with a bunch of stuff that you can just slaughter indiscriminately because it's a God of War game, so of course you're legally obligated to just murder everything that moves and then immediately go back to quipping afterwards.
Exactly.
Most of the
You understand
important
how this
stuff has
works.
been fighting gods, but I don't think we've killed any in this game yet.
Not yet. Give it time.
Still time, yeah.
I was gonna say that I don't know if you mentioned Elk Frovi, but like that's the immediate person who comes to mind when I see the centaur kind of figure is a character who is the son of a shape-shifting bear, and all of the children have various kind of animal features, and one of them is Elk Frovi, who has the hindquarters of an elk.
Hell yeah.
This is
I
why you
love
don't.
those lineages of shapeshifters.
This is why you don't piss off witches. They'll curse you to be a bear.
Oh, this is a bad thing. I see.
Exactly.
This is a bad thing.
Sometimes when people turn into bears, it's cool.
Apparently, he's a very sexy bear, but that's all I
well,
can say.
lucky him. The witch is like, and you shall be forced to transform into a slavering beast. He's like, oh, can I at least be hot? And she's like, well, of course. I'm not a monster.
Sad to see Sigurd's homeland in such a terrible state.
Yeah,
The
go ahead.
Saga-like is just weird. I'll be honest. I got nothing.
Want another before me?
We are gonna
Yeah.
see that.
To discover about
Keep that text in mind though, because we are going to see it again, distressingly soon in this stream.
I
Yeah,
cursed you to be made of boyfriend material. Sorry, I'll stop. I just really like the idea of this witch cursing people to be sexy monsters.
Now she's also horrible because after she tells the witch tells her husband, who is the king, to hunt down this horrible bear, and then
rude.
they decide, you know what the best thing to do? The witch, by the way, fully knows.
Of course she does.
Let's eat the bear, because that's what you do to bears. You have feasts with them.
Ooh.
And the bear, before dying, does tell his wife, don't eat. She's going to kill me, and she's going to like try and make you eat me. Please don't.
Does she?
She's forced to, and that's why the kids are all cursed.
Oh, I see. Well, that's unpleasant.
It's rough.
Compared to the Irish werewolf myths, that's really rough. Because in that one, it's
Yeah.
like this was a dude who could turn into a wolf, and these are his descendants who could also turn into wolves. This is just a fact that we're putting in our historical texts. It's fine.
It's funny because that's like not even that's from a Norse source.
Yeah, of course it is.
Like
Yeah,
that is
so-
in Ireland, but that is a Norse source doing that.
Yeah,
Really?
in Volsunga Saga, Sigmund and Sinfjotli, Sinfjotli is Sigmund's son, they come upon a set of wolf skins that they put on, and then they howled like wolves.
No, this
Yeah.
is different. There's like 4 different Irish werewolf things, all from different areas, and that's one of them. But there's a different one that was he was in like a list of names with no further elaboration. This guy is so niche, I couldn't find a pronunciation guide for his name online, which is fucking rare for Ireland. But his whole thing was just like, from like
helped.
No, it certainly wouldn't have. I would have still gotten yelled at by 2/3 of the population. But it was basically like, this is a dude. He could turn into a wolf. He had descendants. They could turn into wolves. They would go hunting together, and that's all you get.
It's from the Konungs Skugsjá, which is Old Norse for the King's Mirror, a Norse text from about 1250, and in its description of Ireland, it has the most detailed account of those werewolves.
Hold on. That is definitely a source I used. I want to make sure it is the correct one.
It's the oldest one.
That doesn't mean it's the one I'm thinking of.
That's fair. Anyway, while we are looking at werewolves, let's talk about the lore markers, because these are telling an actual story, unlike an actual story from actual mythology, unlike a lot of the bits and bobs in this game. We got 2 in a row that are specifically telling a story from the mythology. So, reading time. Woe to the great Princess Sigrun, her heart is broken and her mind may follow. She committed a sin for which there can be no redemption. She loved the wrong man. Handsome of face and congenial smile, he was perfect. Except for his name, King Helgi. Sigrun's father, King Högni, would never approve of such a marriage for one simple reason. This was the name of his old enemy. So strong was Högni's hatred of Helgi that he would never allow that man into his home. But Sigrun loved him still, so she endeavored to convince her father that love should be, stronger than hatred. She was mistaken.
Devastating. So I found what I was looking for.
Yeah.
You're correct that in the King's Mirror, this is one of the stories that's told, is that when, I think it's, hold on, one of the saints came to Ireland and was, the people howled at him like wolves to drown out his sermons.
Patrick.
So he had God turn them into wolves.
Yeah.
Yes. However, there is a medieval Irish work, Cor Anman, Fitness of Names, which was based on earlier traditions, a legendary warrior werewolf named Laimec Felav, said to be the ancestor of a tribe of werewolves who are related to the kings of Ossory in Eastern Ireland. Like I said, the Irish stories about Irish werewolves are like, this is just a guy who could turn into a wolf and it was fine. All the other stories about Irish werewolves from people who weren't Irish are like, oh, it was a curse. Our gods struck them down. But Ireland was like, yeah, this is just the thing that people can do.
This is the thing. And with that interlude, back to reading.
Yes.
Here are the words of Prince Dagur. My spear drips righteous and red from the blood of that cad King Helgi. My father in his wisdom... Yeah, I know. The drama.
That cad. How dare he?
My father, in his wisdom, denied him the hand of my sister, Princess Sigrun, knowing his true and dark nature. Enraged by this slight, King Helgi gathered his forces and invaded our land, determined to claim his bride. His murderous soldiers dipped their swords into the hearts of all who opposed their unclean union. Mother, father, all my brothers hunted down and slaughtered because he was denied my fair sister. The only male of my line left standing, I impaled the villain Helgi on my spear, did my duty, and avenged my family.
Woo!
Hooray! This is a rendition of the death of Sigurd the Dragon Slayer's cousin, King Helgi, the killer of the Hundings.
Look, the other half of
Oh, these guys.
Yeah, and I mean,
I knew those
his death and Helgi's death at the hands of Dagur, of Prince Dagur.
It's interesting to see it kind of rendered in this way.
Yeah.
It feels like it's taking a really different, really different perspective than the Helga Kavitha Finningsbana poems.
Yeah, because both of those really like Helgi. They shouldn't really like Helgi, but they do.
But is this an otherwise like accurate retelling of the events, just from a different character's perspective?
That's what it feels like.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah, it gets all the plot beats correct. The denial of the marriage, Sigrun's attempt to persuade. Really? Please. Sorry, I'm just trying to get this stupid chest open.
Ah.
The classic.
Good game design.
This is not a story I know very well, but my understanding is that doesn't Helgi or doesn't Sigrun explain to Helgi that she's been betrothed to Hufrudr?
I think so, yes.
Again, this is not a story that I'm very familiar with, but this is an interesting account, and it's interesting to hear it from a very, very different perspective.
Yeah.
Helgi massacred her family just because he couldn't have her.
Yeah.
Her brother, Prince
and
Borga, survived to kill
so yeah.
the Mad King.
Sigurd
He,
and her brother had issues.
Right. Helgi originally kills the other guy, and then that pisses off Hogni. Hogni raises an army against Helgi. Helgi, in the poem, seems to relatively reluctantly commit mass murder, except for Dagur, who then kills Helgi. Sigrun is so heartbroken by this that she basically dies of grief, and then Helgi and Sigrun get reincarnated, significantly later. This poem is weird. Even by the standards of Eddic poems, this poem is pretty weird.
The Eddic poetry is notoriously complex, and there are like I said when I was saying earlier that mythology is unstable. Like, we have so many characters that appear briefly, and then 19th century German historians tried desperately to figure out who they were. It looks like you're going to Valhalla early.
Yeah.
Are you good?
I got a little
Go
bit.
straight to Odin. Do not
These
pass
guys
go.
are tricky. When I played it, I managed to knock the two small dark elves off the edge of the platform by doing the whippy around chain blade attack. I forgot what it's called.
Yeah.
Like the
Chaos,
vicious
something.
cyclone or something. But no, these guys are tough because the big dark elf messes you up.
We're gonna just ignore that. I actually didn't have a lot of trouble in my first playthrough, or my personal playthrough, because I've collected every single Nornir chest possible up to this point. I have not done that in this playthrough. So...
Also, I should mention, we made it to the cosplay challenge.
We did. I will be dressing up at some point in the future. I have to, actually make the cosplay. So patience, everyone, on that front. But that means it is guaranteed going to happen. That means I need to get good at sewing.
Or find a friend.
Yep.
I think that there was a question a little while back that I saw, which was the top 3 sagas based solely on weirdness.
Wow.
Erbrigja.
Yeah, Oyabrigya is extremely weird. It involves a mass haunting, a seal ghost, and lots of walking around backwards and cursing people.
Don't forget the lawsuit related to the mass haunting, because suing the ghosts is better than fighting the ghosts.
Oh, does it work?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, I'm so
actually, part of my master's thesis was about the door court is what it's called, where all the dead who had walked up again are all go in a line and have to have their cases settled, and then they pass through the door and the haunting ceases.
That's incredible.
The door code is really, really interesting, and it's a really, really interesting kind of understanding of how space is configured in the sagas.
Yeah.
So Oyabrigya Saga is extremely weird. A lot of the Fornaldarsögur are quite strange. A lot of them I've read kind of all at once and all together, so they've kind of blurred together. So I'm going to kind of stick in the realm of the Islendingasögur because that's what I know best.
That's fair.
In terms of really, really weird Islendingasögur, Bavava Saga is quite strange. More because it focuses on the genealogy of trolls. It's a troll history.
Yeah. Bavava Saga is the best.
That's actually really cool. Trolls are in this weird space for me where I've been really curious about them, but it's hard to find like the sources exactly because they're just so tertiary in most cases.
Yeah. So. Oh, go ahead,
Real
please.
quick, we had a marginalia moment. I was scrolling back through chat. We had a marginalia moment that we didn't make official, so I'm going to redeem one
Hell
right
yeah.
now, and we can do it officially with the specific commands, so we can get all our marginalia bouncing around on the screen. So
Sadly, I don't have the emote wall active, but we will click over to the other window at least, so that, chat, please fill this with your Ludohistory emotes of all of the marginalia. And as a reminder to folks, as we are now almost an hour in, if you want to get access to these emotes to fill up your marginalia moment, do make sure you hit that subscribe button. If you have Amazon Prime, you have Prime Gaming, and that means you get a free sub every single month. And that means you get access to all of these lovely marginalia and more, which you can spread all over Twitch. They are the best. The youngest one is 19th century Ethiopian. The oldest one is from the Lindisfarne Gospels.
Cool.
Yeah. All right. As we have filled that wall, that was been our marginalia moment.
that will be the march. Yeah, I was scrolling back and I saw like, oh wait, we got the cosplay, and I scroll back up and I saw the moment when it happened, and everyone's like, hey, we did it, and we were just completely off on our own thing. I'm like, wait, no, I gotta represent for chat here.
These Norns have no
Sorry, chat.
does anyone in these
Yeah,
realms
so
have
yeah,
ever seen.
trolls are really interesting in the sagas, and Baba the Saga really gives trolls their due by telling the story of Baba, who is a Norwegian who was a half troll, who was raised in the court of King Dumbr, who is a giant, and he then immigrates to Iceland because of the oppression of King Haraldur Farhari, or sorry, Faharfari.
There it is.
Completely flipped that in my head. And then kind of tells the story of him and his family. One of the most interesting things about Baba Saga is that it has a troll woman, and we hear a story about a troll woman and her relationship with a Icelandic man from her perspective. Normally, we hear it from the perspective of the Icelandic man, and we also have poetry that she composes. So she's really interesting in that regard.
That's
Yeah.
really neat.
Yeah, she's really interesting. It's a sad story, unfortunately. Her
Well,
much like relationships with Valkyries, relationships with giantesses do not go well.
I'm just fully
but-
going in the wrong direction.
Oh yes,
Yeah,
we're
and
in the
then-
super fun part of the game.
How it felt to lose
And
your
then a third weird saga.
merely curious.
If you wish to derive
They're all
some
so weird.
satisfaction from
They're
it,
all
Um,
weird.
I'm afraid you'll be
They're all
disappointed.
weird.
Kratos,
I feel like I'm going to choose I'm going to choose one, but not for maybe a fun reason.
Uh-oh.
I'm going to choose a non-fun one. Sorry. This is like the nerdy historian part. So like now I've mentioned all these trolls and all that coolness. I've mentioned ghosts. I've mentioned all that coolness. I'm going to mention Svartdala Saga, which is one of Adam and I's favorite sagas.
swift and true.
It's a very late saga, and the thing that's interesting about it is it has a very weird history. It was copied at some point. Most of these texts were probably oral or composed in certain in earlier paper or not paper, but earlier text forms before we got them. But the one manuscript that we have of Svartdala Saga is just a single sheet. We only have that. That's it. And then we have a post-medieval 17th century copy of a medieval text that we don't have anymore because University of Copenhagen made the very smart decision to put everything in a very small, very flammable tower.
No!
Yep.
No!
Yep.
Intend to get revenge on Theseus.
So
Did we learn nothing from Alexandria?
No, we didn't.
Quite the opposite, in fact.
We do not have Svartdala Saga except for one sheet of a medieval manuscript, and then the flawed, because the manuscript that was being copied off of was also flawed. So we have a flawed copy of Svartdala Saga, which is missing huge
And if
chunks
Surtur's
of the
approaching
manuscript.
Asgard's wall,
When it is already
Yeah.
So
Ah,
I'm choosing that one as a weird saga because it is one of these really, really interesting. It's a really, really interesting text, but it's a really hard text to do scholarship on because half of it's fucking missing.
Yeah.
Um,
God.
And
well, like thank God we had some guy in the 18th century making a copy of it because otherwise that text is gone.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, if there's one thing
So-
we've learned from media preservation, it's that acquiring
Yeah.
copies of things is the best way to, prevent them from being erased from history for
Yeah.
various reasons, like
And
tax
it's-
breaks or whatever.
Yeah, it's not just a matter of like getting it down once. It's like, okay, you wrote it down. Congratulations, you're immortal. It's like,
Yeah.
no, it requires a consistent preservation over a long period of time, and
Yeah.
any lapse at any point can screw you, and you have to hope that you have it copied in enough different places that when your tower in Copenhagen burns down, you've still got stuff in Reykjavik that's going to be okay.
God,
Yep,
the
and you need
amount of-
redundancy. Like, I feel like we've talked about this on stream before of like how, historical preservation and data management are basically the same thing. But the way that the internet is working and the way that tech development has happened in the last few decades means that things like file formats have
Yeah.
dramatically shifted
Yeah.
to the point where it's like, if you had a Word doc in like 2003 or a text file in 2003, you might not be able to find anything that can open it now. Or if you had all your movies on VHS,
Yeah.
like now is the deadline for when you have to get those copied onto discs, or you're just gonna lose that tape forever because they just degrade. And the thing is, even beyond that, the language you keep your records in is not guaranteed to be preserved, and that's terrifying from a preservation
Yeah.
standpoint. Like, you can do all the documentation you want, but if people don't know how to read it anymore, there's only so much that they're gonna get out of this.
Yeah, and this is
Yeah.
something that I know is really, really scary for, I think, probably Adam and I, is that less and less places are teaching Old Norse as a language.
Oh.
I'm
Yeah.
really, really, really fortunate that I was able to take Old Norse during my bachelor's, my master's, and my PhD. I've taught Old Norse. I teach Old Norse. But Adam and I just witnessed the closing of the University of Aarhus's Old Norse department,
God, it was brutal.
which is one of the last places in Denmark, well, the last place in Denmark where you can do Old Norse. So now the language of the Vikings, Denmark, one of parts of Denmark's cultural heritage, can no longer be taught in Denmark.
Yeah.
Do they have it on Duolingo?
They do not. They
No.
don't even have Icelandic on Duolingo.
God.
I noticed that. I was trying to learn it, and it was just not there.
Nope. And
Um,
also the online program from the Icelandic government on learning Icelandic is bad, and so there's no way to learn Icelandic short of going and living in Iceland for 4 years.
Huh.
Yeah, it's
And even that
it's-
won't teach you Old Norse, so
No.
lose, lose, lose. Go talk to Haraldur, and that's like the only person.
Wow.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, this is something really interesting to think about. Not only when we're thinking about, I think you raised a really, really, really great point, Red, in thinking about kind of the way in which file formats are like a language that can't be read by, but like also the language that texts are preserved in can't be
Yeah.
read. And this is something that I find really, really troubling with Old Norse, particularly because, as we see right on the screen right now, Vikings are super popular and hot right now. But are you going to trust getting your Old Norse from a university, or are you going to trust getting your Old Norse from like a crazy white supremacist guy? Like, I'm really, really worried. Like, on one hand, I'm like, yes, everyone should be learning Old Norse. Awesome, wonderful. But at the same time, I really want to make sure that Old Norse is taught in the right way, as someone who's an instructor of Old Norse.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's a really interesting space. I feel like in this area, just in general, there's this sort of this feeling I get, which is that information starts to fossilize as soon as it's no longer being actively maintained by living people. Like,
Yeah.
writing stuff down is great, but you gotta like refresh that every couple generations, you know, or you lose like valuable context is the kind of thing that you don't write down. You know, every
Yeah.
writer has like a set of things that they can't see because to them they are invisible and normal. And those are the nightmares of historians because they don't write down the information that everybody knows. And then even just 2 generations later, 3 on the outside, that
Yeah.
information is gone. Like, there are things that are like that were in shows from the 2000s where it's like, oh yes, you see, this was a plot point because like cell service had not yet become a consistently available thing or something like that, or like. Oh, they're doing this because that's on a physical tape that they have to rewind, or like this was the way that film editing was done. You actually cut the tape out and then you had to physically splice it in, and it left a mark that you could see on the tape. And it's just like all these niche little details about specific forms of information technology that, you know, once that technology becomes obsolete because it's been replaced by something newer, people forget the details of that.
Yeah.
How many people know how to bookbind these days who aren't like hobbyists or Girl Scouts? You know, it's it's not really a thing that gets taught because we have mass production of books down to a science at this point. But there's skills that went into, you know, when bookbinding all had to be done by hand that are just sort of gone, and the information that was just normalized because this was a known thing is also gone now because it's not being preserved in the active living collective unconscious. And like, this is a shift that happens so slowly, and it happens in the space of things that people don't see because they're normalized. So these changes can be massive, and you only notice when you look back and you're like, wait, I don't know what that means anymore.
Yeah, and I mean, I think part of this is us also. I think you raised a really important point about how things that are normalized in a culture are not necessarily things that are included in cultural texts. You kind of get traces of them. And this is a real nightmare for me, not just because I'm interested in those kind of quotidian, everyday parts of the experience that don't get mentioned, but my PhD thesis is on failure in the sagas. Failure, disappointment, despair, death, dying, misery.
Good stuff.
Fun stuff. But I'm really interested in kind of failure and countercultural production within Old Norse literary culture and Old Norse society. And how do you find a counterculture within a pre-modern text created by a hegemonic culture?
Yeah.
Like, how do you do that?
Where is it?
Where do you start? Where do you begin to start?
Yeah. That's like, you got to read between the lines super hard just to sort of get an inkling of what that would be.
Exactly. And like, for me, who's also really interested in kind of like, where do we find queerness in these texts? Like, where do we find like alternative configurations of gender and sex? Like, how can we find them in these texts?
Yeah.
And to quote the queer theorist Jack Halberstam, the subversive is always embedded in the dominant. So that is something that I try to keep in mind when I bring to any cultural product, whether it's Norse, Old Norse sagas, or whether it's God of War. Like, what subversive narrative are we getting amongst this very dominant narrative?
I suppose that's why people always focus on Loki and his really complicated relationship with gender, because Loki is framed as the subversive figure and also the one who's constantly gender bending and boning things and giving birth to stuff, and is also consistently referred to as male whenever well, at least, okay, caveat, I've only read the translations. I can't speak Old Norse, so I don't know what the pronoun situation was in the originals.
Thrimskavida, when Loki cross-dresses as the Thor's handmaiden, just says the handmaiden consistently. It's wild.
Love it.
So this is a really interesting thing about pronouns in Old Norse. So pronouns are gendered in Old Norse. Hun and hun, he and her. But when characters are in disguise or are dressing as the opposite gender, the pronouns will shift with them.
That's fun. Makes sense.
And you'll also have characters who are in disguise as another character, and they'll introduce themselves as, "Oh, my name is Gester," and then the narration will consistently refer to them as Gester until it's revealed that they are in fact Viglunder. So the narration likes to pull these tricks where it will where really it's actually quite interesting because it seems to be a privileging of self-identification rather than a imagined truth or imagined objectivity. So that's something that I find really kind of liberating about Old Norse texts, is that they seem to take seriously what people say about themselves.
That's cool. And also a very interesting, just, I guess, narrative, what's the word? It's not like trope and it's not standard, but like just the I've lost it, sorry, but like just the thing that everybody does, a style that's sort of universal.
Yeah.
Because you know, that's not really how we tend to do things. Like in modern writing, for the most part, if a character is in disguise and the audience knows that that character is in disguise, they'll be referred to as their true identity. And you know, if it's prose and we have access to their inner monologue, you know, it might, or maybe it'll be like, oh yes, I'm this person, they lied, or something like that. Just to sort of remind the audience who's who and what's going on.
Every line in the Odyssey is Odysseus said through his teeth.
Yeah, which is great. I always love the scrungly little liar boys in these mythologies. Odysseus is my boy, and Odin is my boy, and I love it. They're all so terrible.
Yep.
Do you regret it?
They truly are. By the way, chat, not at risk of derailing things, if you want to hear more about preservation and how painful that is, we have a book historian on next week for Pentiment, and if you think we're not going to talk preservation, you've never been in a room with a book historian.
That's all they want to talk about.
It's all we talk about. I promise you, it's like every conversation is pain about preservation, and delight when weird shit gets preserved, because, I mean, in an Icelandic context in particular, it's so fun, because, right, I mean, I describe your stuff as, like, weird late stuff that scholars generally, historically have called not very good, right? Finnboga Saga-rama, the opinion for 150 years was that it wasn't good. Svartdæla Saga, the opinion still is that it's not very good. Bosa Saga, very fun, not good.
It doesn't excuse what he said at my
And so we end up with this like huge body of work that, if you look at the scholarship on it, you'd say these were incredibly unpopular. No one has ever like operated with them ever. There are 46 manuscripts of Finnboga Saga.
Yep.
And it's a ridiculous number of manuscripts.
That's a lot. By manuscript standards.
And of course, that's also filtering down by surviving, which is
Of course.
that the original number must have been much higher.
Half of these big boys, it's like, oh, this is the consolidated version from the 4 translations we have. 3 of them are fragmentary in ways that overlap. Some of this is only present in the 4th one, which was written 500 years later by a medieval monk. And it's just like, oh god. How much of this can I trust?
I see you are about to get stars on the Islands Fornrit hot takes.
I'm not gonna take any hot takes on the Islands Fornrit. So for those of you who don't know, and that's probably literally anyone who is cooler than me. So the Islands Fornrit is a very, very good project.
It's very important.
It's a really important project. What it does is that it makes standardized editions of Old Norse texts. So spelling doesn't standardize until relatively recently in human history.
Right.
Icelandic is extremely unstandardized. And so when you read Old Norse, you're always reading in standardized Old Norse when you're taught Old Norse. But then you get to your first manuscript and it's a whole other ballgame. Because first it's written in an impossible medieval hand. And Icelanders are known for having the darkest manuscripts in Western Europe. The sheep have darker skin in Iceland than other parts of the world.
Really?
So, it's the fact.
Really.
God, what a problem.
It's black ink on dark brown sheepskin.
Oof. Hold on, I'm gonna look this up.
Please do.
Look up the copy of the Codex Regius.
For fuck's sake.
Either of the prose or the Poetic Edda, doesn't matter. They're both rubbish.
Yeah. I'll drop a link in the chat of an example of this. But because so you're confronted with an extremely dark manuscript that you can barely read, and here's a link in the chat for you all. Oh no, I'm not logged in.
Oh no!
Oh no! If you put it in the main chat, we
Yeah.
can sort of just pop it in from there.
Here,
Yeah.
I'm gonna give it to you over Discord.
Yeah.
Oh my god, I'm like
Bravo.
so technically incapable.
Don't
It's
worry.
okay.
We believe.
there it is.
Yeah.
Earlier,
We just
if Atreus hadn't been there.
So you're confronted with this, and
go again.
it's also in a
Oh my
spelling.
god! What a mess!
Horrible.
Drop it. Yep.
Yeah,
Let's hit everyone in chat. Let's hit with this.
I'm
'cause-
seeing a lot of prenda, but that's all I got.
Red, you got it, or should I?
I got it.
Okay.
It's which boy are we talking about here?
so
Here, actually,
this
chat.
is-
I've got a better option. We're going to hide. I'm going to pull this into the right window, and then you can all see this live and in person. Oh, did I just close it? No. We're good. We're good. This is fine.
At least it's an
Everything's
alphabet.
fine.
sorry,
can
I didn't
read.
mean. I didn't manage. I didn't want to derail anything, but
No,
No, this is great.
we're
This is why
doing
we're
this. This
here.
is spicy history content.
You know, it
Complaining
never
about
occurred to
manuscripts.
me that you could potentially like selectively breed livestock for better writing leather. Like that's not something that ever occurred to me, but I kind of like that in a sick
so-
way.
yeah,
This is such a good
manuscript.
digitization too.
Wow, yeah, that's crisp. That's
Oh,
HD.
Oh, and this is a beautiful hand. Wait, I love this hand.
The hand is not bad. So the handwriting itself is not too terrible, which is unusual. Usually the hand is much worse.
True.
God.
But this is a quite damaged and quite dark. I have seen darker, but this is pretty typical, I would say, of 13th century Icelandic manuscripts. This is a selection from Eil Saga Skallagrimssonar, so the saga of Eil Skallagrimsson, from 1240 or 1260. It is 3 leaves of fragments. And as you can see, it's quite hard to read. So what the Icelandic Fornrit project does is that it takes these manuscripts and often in some cases, will make an edition of them or work from an existing edition, so a transcription of a particular manuscript, and then compile them and choose the best possible option into a diplomatic and a normalized orthography based upon what the Icelandic Fornrit thinks that the orthography would look like at the time that the saga was written. That means that the orthography chosen by the editors of the Icelandic Fornrit might be completely different to its dating,
Oh god.
or completely different to what it looks like in the manuscript. It entirely depends upon what the editors think that
Good lord.
it looks like.
Sorry, chat, I've quick switched windows on stream. This is Hervarar Saga, one of my personal favorite sagas. This is what Icelandic hands usually look like. This is much more the energy.
This is how I feel. Like I had a similar experience with the one Middle Egyptian class I took because it was so fun. But it's like if you're not reading the Unicode hieroglyphs, it's like I can't tell which fucking bird that's supposed to be. And like when the scribes got really quick about it, when they started writing in ink on papyrus, and it just turned into I want to say Coptic. Which is like essentially the equivalent of cursive hieroglyphs. It's like I got no fucking clue. It's all squiggles. It's squiggles.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where like if you're theoretically fluent, you can kind of skim it and be like, you know, bad handwriting is whatever. I know what the word is supposed to look like. My brain's going to autocomplete it. If you're still learning basically the letters or the syllables, you got no friggin' luck. Like your brain doesn't even know what a word would look like.
The thing about the page that Adam is showing us right here is also that Old Norse is extremely heavily abbreviated because Iceland is dirt poor. Dirt poor for most of its history. And so imagine you're trying to save space. And so
we've only got
words,
3 sheep to work on. Sorry.
Exactly.
You're
so
not wrong.
words that Words that have a line above them, like the M's that, or really it's a double N, that are kind of in the middle of this, actually indicate that something has been taken out.
Wow.
So not only do you have to familiarize yourself with a orthography you don't know, a dark manuscript page, a probably unreadable hand,
Yep.
but now it's also heavily abbreviated.
Yep.
Oh boy. I'll be right back. I gotta
these-
fold my croissants more. Sorry.
Hang on, I'm going to look at a specific manuscript, which is
It's got
very
laminate,
important. Mother of Atlabok.
Sorry, I feel like I've completely derailed our stream of God
No,
lore.
this is the energy that we want. Mother of Atlabok is extremely heavily abbreviated. It's also got like most of the sagas. I mean, beautiful text, right? Beautiful manuscript. But it is extremely heavily abbreviated. So, you know, that Viv and that other Viv in there.
It's a beautiful text, but
it's rough. There's only one manuscript that I'd say like doesn't follow those rules, and that's Flat Book, because they had a lot of money when they were making that one and nothing else.
Well, that was a Norwegian production, wasn't
Exactly. It's Norwegian funded. It was made in Iceland, but it is funded by the Norwegians.
Yeah, so my point is that the Islandsk Fornrid is a very good project. So they have made all these wonderful editions of the sagas that are in normalized Old Norse. So if you learn Old Norse, if someone teaches you, maybe me, you can kind of read it easily, even though it does have all these editorial issues where certain manuscripts are privileged over others and the orthography is standardized to whatever the editors thought was the right move,
yes,
or the right strategy. For some texts, they include some bits and ignore others, but they usually tend to be good about kind of noting where the editors in general tend to be good about noting where they've made omissions or changes.
Yeah, no, like editing, I've done just a very small bit of very casual manuscript editing work for various manuscript studies classes. It's hard. I have a ton of respect for the folks at EF. It's just also fun to have hot takes about them sometimes.
So, Adam, this is something that we might want to start talking about in terms of what's happening in games. We just got
yeah, sorry.
What? No.
Well, no. This is a good little bit to mention, but I don't know if it'll take up a whole bunch of time or if this is just kind of like an offhanded thing. But we were mentioning this in call beforehand, so I want to make sure we're going to have an opportunity to get to it.
Sure. We are going to, in just a moment, we're going to get a new tool of our, one of my favorite weapons in the entire mythological corpus. So we are in an area that's like a king's barrow, which, by the way, if you are playing bingo at home with us, do make sure you check those marks for random Stonehenge megaliths, because those we have in fact gotten the trilithons here and Shaq. They make no sense in this game. They make no sense in most games. But this is a king's barrow for a specific person. And that specific person is actually someone we've mentioned already in this stream. It is going to be the sword of Hrolver Kraki. And that's very exciting. Do we literally have a bingo card? No. If someone wants to make a bingo card, I'll distribute it. But we do not currently have a bingo card.
I think you should have a bingo card.
I should have a bingo card.
I agree.
It's a good point.
Subscriber milestone. Get bingo card.
Exactly. You know what? We should do that. You're not provided a bingo card. Oh, tragic. Yeah, it is the hilt of a sword. And it's just the hilt of a sword. Red, you happen to have a description of the hilt of this particular sword.
Yes.
Do you want to read? Yes,
Scotland?
the
Yes.
hilt of Skopnungur, the sword hilt of Hrolver Kraki.
Yes.
This is a sword that is extremely well attested in the mythological corpus. Do you want to read the description of it that comes to us from Ragnarok Saga?
I sure can, although I gotta warn you, this translation has a lot of thous in it for some freaking reason.
It's 20th century.
Let's see. So basically, Cormac needs the sword, and he's gonna get it from Skeggi. And he's been directed there, and he goes there, and it's a saga. All the writing is described. So he sought Skeggi and asked for Skofnung. Hard wilt thou find it to handle, said Skeggi. There is a pouch to it, and that thou shalt let be. Sun must not shine on the pommel of the hilt. Thou shalt not wear it until fighting is forward, and when ye come to the field, sit all alone, and then draw it. Hold the edge toward thee, and blow on it. Then will a little worm creep from under the hilt. Then slope thou the sword over, and make it easy for that worm to creep back beneath the hilt.
Yes.
Here's a tale of tricks, thou warlock, cried Cormac. Nevertheless, answered Skeggi, it will stand thee in good stead to know them. And then he doesn't listen to him at all, and the sword doesn't come out of the scabbard until he pulls it out by force, and then it loses all its magic.
Yes. So, in short, and by the way, when it says worm, this is a case of 1910's translation being 1910's translation. It is a snake.
Yeah, they mean snake.
It
Yeah,
is a
big
teeny tiny snake that lives in the hilt of this sword, and so you just have to sit in the shade, all alone, on the battlefield, and then a snake will come crawling out of it, and then you pet the snake, and then you turn it over so that the snake can go back inside the hilt and curl up and take a nap while you murder everyone.
Honestly, just a regular sword would be more efficient.
Well, Skofnung has another property as well.
Go for it.
Well, anytime it's drawn, it slays.
Yeah, exactly.
One of those kinds of swords.
Like most cursed swords in Norse mythology, when you pull it out of its sheath, it must go into a human body before it can be sheathed again.
This is just a thing with a lot of these weapons. Like the Diabolica is like, you have to keep it in a bathtub full of human blood or it gets testy and starts stabbing.
Exactly.
Well, that's how I'm choosing to interpret the kind of description of Skofnung as singing whenever it tastes bone, which is a pretty weird description.
Yeah,
but,
that's fair.
Yeah, swords in the sagas are deeply strange. I'm kind of glad that Kratos has a badass Viking axe, a badass Viking sword. Just because I feel like everyone associates axes with Vikings, but swords are so much more attested to in the sagas. I feel like it's about time we got a cool axe.
True.
So, though there is Battle Hag, the name of Skarphaven's axe in the Jarl Saga.
So cool.
Which is a great name for weapon.
There's also the weird short spear, Gorausila.
Yeah.
Which
is reforged into a sword, isn't it?
Yeah. It's a really shitty sword. That's another one that goes from our legendary corpus into our family saga corpus, into our contemporary saga corpus. So there is fully, theoretically, 400 years of our traditions about this one weapon.
Wow.
Yeah, because Snorri's oldest nephew supposedly has the same sword that Gisli Sursun has, which is the broken spear that shows up in the sword with roots back in the legendary corpus.
Huh.
And it sucks, and whenever he's fighting with it, he has to keep stepping on it to straighten out the blade because it keeps warping.
God, that's so funny. Normally, broken swords are like a cool, sexy thing for people to have.
Nope, this...
Aragorn style.
Nah, in Icelandic, it's quite the opposite. Because the classic thing is not that it shatters, it's that the sword warps. Because it's just bad.
Wow.
I think it's a penis joke.
Yes.
Aww.
Well, there's a kenning for...
Oh, no.
There's a kenning, so a kenning is like a it's like a pun. It's a poetic way of saying something else.
Right.
It's an innuendo, and one of the sexiest kennings is harsverf, which means hair sword, and it's applied to someone whose hair sword is not working so well.
Well, like heir to the throne?
No, hair, as in
hair, as in like
human
bodily hair.
Yeah.
Oh, sure. I like my version better.
I know.
Take notes, Icelandic scalds. Doing your job for you.
but there are a couple of cases where swords, like Adam said, warp or melt. In probably the most famous is in Beowulf, when Beowulf falls in the dragon against the dragon. This poem mentions that his sword melted twice.
Oh no! The dragon melted his dick. Beowulf, no.
It also fails him in his fight against Grendel's mother, and Grendel's mother actually climbs on top on him.
Yep.
And his
No, no, I don't want to read into this.
Verily thou
And-
shalt not stick thine dick in crazy.
And unfortunately, she sticks her knife into him.
Oh, well, I mean, some people are into that, so.
Yeah, sometimes you have to pay extra for that, but that is not what happens in Beowulf. But don't worry, Beowulf scholars have dismissed the scene as not being sexy at all, so we can all rest easy.
Unfortunately,
the
modern
scholars determined this was unsexy. We can go home, everybody.
the
The
problem
Beowulf
is,
scholars have kink shamed and moved on.
right. Normally, I'm against academic gatekeeping, but given how the Beowulf movie starring Angelina Jolie, I'm with the scholars on this one.
Yeah, yeah.
I am a defender of the Beowulf and Angelina Jolie. I'm gonna come out and say it. I feel like this is a safe space. I am a defender of it. And actually, the last time I saw that movie was
Wait, how many times have you seen this movie?
Let's not talk about that.
Okay.
The last time I saw that movie was in a class on reading Beowulf in Old English.
That's
with
also the
Robert-
last. That's also the last time I saw that movie. Was also
But-
in an
but-
old
but-
English class about Beowulf.
But Robert Bjork was the one who was teaching the class, who is the editor and one of the world's leading experts on Beowulf, and he's a defender of that movie. So it makes me feel like it's cool if I'm a defender of that movie.
You know, I have noticed that a lot of like extremely badass academics kind of like the sort of trashy, inaccurate media about their field of expertise, just because it's like it's kind of fun. Because in a dinosaur science class I took the night before we left for a dig, we all watched Jurassic Park, which was the first time I'd seen that movie. And I sort of braced myself for like, oh, those aren't velociraptors, they're closer to Deinonychus or whatever. And instead everyone was just like, oh, that's so fucking cool.
It's so fucking
It's a
cool.
dinosaur. And a lot of them are like, this is kind of why I got into paleontology, because this movie made paleontology look so cool.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with chat. Trash can be fun.
Yeah.
I really, no one, Adam and I talked about this extensively at Saga-con, which is the nerdiest thing that anyone can ever do on in their human life. Which is, I really don't have time for kind of criticism on medieval media like that's like, oh my god, the shoes were inaccurate. It was ruined for me, and I just don't have time for that. It's like, have some joy in your life.
I didn't tell
Like, is this what you're worried about? I wish I was worried about that kind of thing.
I will say,
What a life you must lead.
I mean, you're right, but I know some people for whom half the joy they get out of like historical media is being like,
Yeah,
oh, that's
sure.
not right. There's nothing wrong with getting their kicks where they do, but I think sometimes people take it a little far and get a little obnoxious about it, where it's like, oh, this would have been good. I would have given you my accolades, but you fucked up this one thing that scholars actually disagree on, and maybe you didn't fuck it up at
Yeah.
all. But anyway, it's like this is all it's not subjective, it's just, half of it we just don't have the information for. So when people are like, haha, inaccurate, it's like, oh yeah, you want to write a fucking, in regards to that other paper, you want to subtweet me academically? You want to cite your fucking sources, bud?
Yeah.
Jeez.
Shannon pointed out the good counterexample of the
The sooner we find your son, the sooner
turns out academics sometimes love it or we gatekeep too much. The counterexample is Troy.
Thank you.
That movie's just
Oh.
not good.
Nobody likes Troy.
No,
That's because Troy cuts out large swaths of what people like about the Iliad. Like, as
Yeah.
soon as they were like, we're gonna have no gods in this, it's like, oh yeah, because you know what everybody loves about Greek mythology? The fucking normal people. Yeah, sign me up.
Well, didn't they also make Achilles straight?
Yeah, they made
Like
Achilles
aggressively straight.
Yeah, like what's the point? Like what's the point?
They cousined him in Patroclus.
Honestly, what is the point?
Well, the point is they wanted Brad Pitt to play him.
Yeah, well,
That's
I
not
don't
a good
actually know
point.
what Brad Pitt's thoughts are. I'm not saying it's good. I'm saying this is Hollywood. You know how they roll. We don't need to be willfully ignorant of how they work.
That's fair.
I can't
I guess-
believe they wouldn't put a gay romance on screen in what 2003.
2003. Yeah, I think.
God, how do I know that? Oh man, I just can't understand why they would do that. It's truly.
Yup, I know.
That was back in the day when it's like on the schoolyard it would be like, don't say gay if you mean stupid, and it's like, oh why? Bad word, and it's like,
Rest in peace, Red's microphone.
Stronger this time.
what did I die?
You peaked.
You fizzled it.
Discord auto muted you because you peaked.
Oh,
Yeah.
huh.
Yeah.
Well, that's
boy.
really funny. Turn down my volume a little bit then.
Sorry, I've completely lost track of what on earth we are doing in God of War.
We're about to go talk to the
can we
Nornians.
complain about the game now? Because this is the part of the game that made me kind of think I don't maybe like this game very much.
Oh, we skipped all the side questing. Don't worry.
No. This is
Or-
the main quest line. The game
Yeah.
drags you along.
Yeah. So
Red and I were playing this section of the game together a few weeks back, and I was trying to be generous, and Red was like, "Oh no, I'm having none of this."
Aw.
The thing is, like, here's the thing. This game is so good in so many ways. We can call it out when it pulls some hot bullshit. So
No,
just
for
to,
sure.
I haven't been watching it super closely. We haven't found the fates yet, right?
We are walking up to them.
Okay, fantastic.
So we're about
So-
to have a dream sequence. Just
Oh dear.
don't worry about it.
You know what? I'll save my complaints then. I'll holster that.
Yeah.
We'll
I've
just
gotta
see
do.
how this plays out.
I've gotta do some traversal first, but then we're gonna have a dream sequence.
Riveting gameplay.
True.
I seem to remember not liking the dream sequences in the first God of War. So we're gonna find out how I feel about them this time around.
Exactly. I will say, I think their version on how they do the Nornir is extremely weird, but also I don't hate it.
I like parts of it. I don't have complaints about the Nornir so much as, well, you know, we'll just get to it.
We'll see it in a sec.
We'll
I
see
can
it.
take a second to talk about, for the context of what Kratos' relationship to fate is in the previous games and
Do
why
it.
he might think this is a good idea, because the whole point of God of War 2 is essentially that Kratos gets tricked into pouring all of his god power into his sword, which gets him killed. He ends up, he gets better, it's fine. Death does not bother Kratos for long, but he essentially makes a plan to go to the Fates to go back in time to before he poured all of his god power in the sword so he can go beat up Zeus. And he does actually go back in time. He goes to get the Fates to help him, but they refuse, so he kills them by force and then goes back in time. Actually going back in time so far that the boss battle from God of War 1 where you kill Ares is happening in the background, which is
God, that's
insane. And then you eventually do go, but it's fine. But Kratos' previous experience with fate is as something that, when necessary, is very malleable, and you can exercise force against the concept of fate because the people who are in charge of it are people, therefore pliable, therefore killable if you need to. So when Kratos is in a bind of Atreus went probably to Asgard, we didn't see him do it, but like where else would he be? He's got to be in Asgard right now. That's clearly not good. What do I do? He says, let's go talk to the Norns. And Frey and Mimir are like, are you gonna try and kill him? And Kratos is like, no, I just want information. And Mimir, earlier in the stream, we saw Mimir say, yeah, that's also dangerous, Kratos. I know you're trying to be like chill about this, but that's also very oof. This can really not go great. So what Kratos exactly wants is to figure out what's happening and where the prophecies fit into this. But we also get the sense that Kratos is doing this because it's familiar. When Kratos doesn't know what else to do, he seeks out the people who would know what to do. And even if he doesn't intend to kill anyone, the very old Kratos response of when in doubt seek out fate is
Yeah.
interesting that he slips back into this old character trait of his.
Of the Valkyries.
Yeah, that is interesting, especially considering the kind of difference, I think, between the kind of Greek or Roman idea of fate versus the Old Norse version of fate, which do, of course, have similarities, but they do feel distinctly different within these kind of mythological contexts. Yeah, I was going to say something about Vafandi. Vafandi is a weird word. It's the present participle of the verb verfa, which means to become. So it's literally, his name translates as becoming or being, which is quite a weird word, and is used as analogous for the Fates in Völuspá, the prophetic poem that kicks off the Poetic Edda in most editions.
And one of the other fates, Urður, right? When we talk about, I don't know, like the Weird Sisters, Weird is the Old Norse, or is the English cognate to the word Urður in Old Norse. And so we have weird, becoming, and I don't even know how to translate Skuld, I'll be honest.
Skuld is hard.
They're very cool. They feel poetic to me. I mean, of course, a lot of Norse mythology is intrinsically poetic just because of the nature of the beast. But I almost wonder if the way that the Fates, or I guess the Norns, are characterized is a little bit closer to how, like, the Muses are framed as, like, less deities, or yes, deities, but in a very sort of, like, how to describe, embodiments of fundamental forces that you really want to be on your side, but can't really guarantee that. So of course with the Muses, it's artistic inspiration, which any artist will tell you can't control. You just kind of have to hope it's working. And there were Muses for like astronomy and exploration and philosophy and stuff like that. Things that weren't artistic endeavors, but were still, involved a lot of luck and a lot of creativity and seeing things from other angles and inspiration, moments of clarity. And I wonder if essentially embodying the Fates as it's like there are three women that sit under the tree of the world and they spin fate. And but there's also parts of the poems that are like everybody has a set of Norns, and bad people have bad Norns, or people with bad lives have bad Norns that are being jerks to them. And it's like, so is this there are three goddesses that control everything, or is this there are three entities and they control your life personally? And, it can mean both of those things, especially if they're poetic figures. Poetry has all kinds of stuff about goddess-like figures that, are sort of simultaneously hugely universal and intensely personal to the writer.
I think that it's complicated because, like all these things, I think it's complicated. So, like I mentioned, in Gisli Saga, you have these dream visions of these two dream women who seem to function as Norns. They are spinning his intestines. They are spinning the blood.
Yeah.
They are measuring his fate, and there's a bad one and a good one. But there's two of them, not three. In terms of the kind of analogs with the Muses, I agree with you in terms of the fact that they are these kind of unstable entities, but I don't necessarily think that these are goddesses to entreat. I think that these are not figures that you interact with. These seem very, very distant and very primordial. And really, the Norns are present the Norns are present in the Poetic Edda, but really, really on the edges. Really in Völuspá. They're also in Nathan Tafel or something like that. They're Gilfinga. They're in a list of names.
Right.
They're not central characters.
Exactly.
And oh, please go ahead.
Whereas there's one place where Skuld is also a Valkyrie. That makes it.
Yes.
And there's also one text that says that there's more than 3 Nornir.
Yeah.
There's a whole slew of Nornir for people, a whole slew of Nornir for gods, and a whole slew of Nornir for elves, I think.
Everybody
It's either
does.
elves or dwarves.
Exactly.
And it's like, great, so are there capital N Nornir and then lowercase n Nornir, and we just they're not the same.
And that's why I think they are a poetry thing. You know, I think they're there because when you're telling a story, it helps to have the concept of people controlling the plot as a character. Just because then it's easier to, you know, have punchy one-liners about it, or like, and then the thread was cut and stuff like that. It facilitates a lot of storytelling opportunities. And because so much of what we have is intensely poetical, I think it makes sense to personify these forces, even if it's just in a very, you know, it's like how people call like the ocean, like, oh, you know, the old Grey Widowmaker, she's a harsh mistress, and it's like, so you worship some sort of ocean deity. No, the ocean's a fact. It's not a god. It's just there, and it doesn't care about you.
I will say, being the person who knows the absolute least about Norse mythology on this call, I'm taking a bit of a stab here, but going back to a little bit of like Kratos' perspective coming from Greece, you know, in Greek mythology, fate is a very strong thing, and people usually can't break their fate, and if they try, they just run headlong into it. But there's no sense of overarching universe-sized prophecy. Like, if the gods want something to happen, it happens. Troy falls when Zeus says, okay, fine, we can be done, all right, gang, clear up, let Odysseus do whatever, and then we can just go home or whatever. Whereas, you know, even in Norse mythology and in this game, there's nothing that even the gods can really do to get ahead of it or to get over top of it. And the idea that the fates kind of behave differently between them, that the Norns are, like you guys said, more of a primordial force that is not necessarily a person that could be persuaded or talked to, but just a fact. I think it works with any of the various readings that we've kind of proposed in the last like 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And
we
now
have
we've
the
got
part
our
we're
dream
complain about.
sequence.
Yes, good.
Yep. By the way, also, chat, if you are keeping track on your definitely existent bingo cards, we promise, do make sure you check that box for Galdrastavir, because we just had one of those show up for no reason. We had an Ægishjálmur show up, despite the Ægishjálmur being, that specific Ægishjálmur being probably developed in the 17th century and most famously tested in a 19th century manuscript.
Outrageous.
Yeah, I've been noticing lots of sort of early modern magic runes
Aren't there
in the
so many of
background.
them?
And I'm always a little suspicious when I see those.
Still better than Assassin's Creed.
Yay!
I think that there was a question in chat about weird versus Uther. Weird in Old English is, as Adam was saying, is cognate with Uther. But the idea that weird does seem to have a kind of more of a personification, or not personification, but kind of as more conceptualized as an essential force within Old English poetry. I'm thinking of texts like The Wanderer, like Beowulf, whereas in Old Norse, it's a little bit vaguer. You do have characters saying things like fate goes as it must, or this is how it's going to go, but it's much more kind of blunt. And that's partially just the kind of style of the sagas, of just being like, well, this is how it's going to go.
Exactly.
Maybe I'll die, maybe I won't.
C'est la vie, I guess. Yeah.
My favorite rendition of that is in Sigurd Rifamal in the Poetic Edda, where Sigurd Rifa is like, you know, I can tell you exactly when you're going to die, Sigurd. And he's like, yeah.
Please don't.
No, I'd be bothered if I thought I was going to live forever. I didn't think that in the beginning, so kind of whatever. I don't care if I'm going to die unpleasantly, because I was going to die in some way, and it may as well be existently.
Yeah. Like, once you're dead, how it happened is kind of everybody else's problem, you know? Like...
Can I just say, Sigrun gave a real strange list of characters.
Yes, please.
Titania, Groa, and...
Oh, yes, the
So-
Mimir as Puck thing the game insists on doubling down on for some reason.
Yes, Mimir is Puck.
I like it, but I also hate it.
I don't know even how to feel about that.
I like
Yeah.
Puck as a character, so I sort of like it. But also, the timeline of that is fucking bonkers, so I hate it.
Oh, we don't, when we hear more about Helgi, sometime in between leaving Oberon's court and the present, working for Odin, Mimir went to Gamaleya and caused the events of Saga-like
Great.
at
Fantastic.
Gamaleya. A very distinctly historical space.
I see.
Yeah,
That is also the problem with putting him in Midsummer Night's Dream, which is about Theseus and Hippolyta in the historical framing sequence.
yeah.
So are we indicating that the actual historical ancient Greece that Kratos presumably left as a smoldering, sunless apocalypse is still, I don't know, trucking along?
Yep.
Having its normal politics going down?
I think that's what that means.
God, that's... Ugh!
I mean, this game has a very weird Uchronia because Kratos
Yeah.
was present at the Trojan War, and also
Yeah.
I think I'm trying to remember what the latest device that they mention is. They talk about theater. The play Sophocles exists. So I mean, they're condensing 1,000 years into one cultural moment, which for the purposes of a video game, it's fine. It's fine. It's clearly they take classical Greece and imply that the Trojan War happened like 100 years before, and Kratos is just a little on the old side, as opposed to saying like, oh, all this whole stuff actually happened at the same time. It's clearly classical Greece plus this older stuff that we're just bringing in. It's like forgivable.
When Mimir
But-
called himself a merry wanderer of the night last game, I
Oh,
kind of lost it.
by the way,
But, I mean,
there's...
The games
very
play with the
briefly.
Uchronia in every aspect.
Yes.
We still haven't met the friggin' fates?
It's over.
God, this game!
Pass the test.
Look, there's a lot of button mashing.
I keep checking back in to see when I can start yelling.
Don't worry. We have a one more very strange entity to talk about. In the list, speaking of Uchronias, a Kelpie?
Oh, that's right, the Kelpie.
She take us to them.
The Scottish folklore animal, basically. We're not just Scottish, but...
Exactly. In the Discord, folks, I did drop earlier. Our very own watcher, who is, you know, a PhD student and Irish roleplay, very graciously, they put together a reference document for us as to what the heck is a Kelpie.
That's a good one.
And let's see what it says.
Temperamental by reputation.
Because I
And
haven't
keep children away from the law.
looked at
By
it
telling
recently.
them a Kelpie would
Do you want me to
We should do
skim
that.
through it?
I should at least. I've got it open now.
It walks on water.
I mean, he did just mention that Kelpies are come from Locks, so there is the sense that they belong to Scotland rather
There
than.
were the hippocamps.
Yeah,
They serve
because
the
it's
sea god.
according to the document, the name appears to be an Anglicization of Scots Gaelic capel, a word for colt or mare. And so, yeah, there is an Old Norse cognate to Kelpies. It is Nikur, and it,
Oh!
right, they hadn't used that for an enemy type, the Nurkur. This would be perfectly appropriate because in Saga Kraka,
We're here.
Nikur appear as water horses.
Never doubted we'd make it.
Yeah, there's sort of that's there's like a whole etymological space of like nixies to
Yeah.
nox to et cetera, that are all just like malevolent water spirits of various kinds that are just bad and problems.
Exactly. Where is the thing on? I assume it's not here.
Your bestiary is the next was in the previous tab.
Was it? I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's listed in the friends in the lore instead of in the bestiary, which is the killable things.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. Notably, the Kelpie in the game is covered in kelp. This
Yeah,
feels
which is a false
intuitive.
etymology thing.
This is exactly. It's not real, but it does feel intuitive. So
Yeah, it's got nothing to do with kelp like seaweed, but you know, if you've got the easy framing sequence, because the thing is, the way that kelpies folklorically work is that they appear as these beautiful horses, and then if you ride them, they just ride straight into the ocean and you drown.
Exactly.
Which you probably wouldn't do if it was a spooky wet horse that looked like a weird seaweed zombie. Like, oh man, what a beautiful, majestic creature. I trust that thing with my life.
In more modern Icelandic folklore, Nykur do exactly the same thing, except that if you know its name and realize that it is a Nykur, you can just call it a Nykur and then it becomes a regular horse.
Huh.
It just
That's
works.
convenient.
As demonstrated in the folkloric touchstone Frozen 2.
Exactly.
I actually read a good article about Frozen 2 being a good piece of folkloric
Hell yeah.
modern
Really?
modern preservation. Yeah.
Honestly, I really liked Frozen 2. I know that's like, we all kind of forgot about Frozen 2 30 seconds after it came out, but...
Honestly,
Let's,
I
let's,
would
save
say
that, let's save that for post
Yeah.
cutscene, because this is a major
Okay.
plot cutscene.
Yep.
All right, here comes the plot.
Unfortunately.
They're the narrators.
I seek my son.
I do like that part. That part's cute. Kind of.
You know the child is an Asgard. No, you seek what all who search for us seek.
Oh
To
boy.
know the ending to your story.
The ghost of Sparta furrows his brow menacingly. He
I like her
resists
look.
the urge to grunt.
I like how they all look. The visual design of this place is great.
Fails.
The drip is good.
You come to us, hideous archetypes, seeking freedom from your scripts. As if knowing your lines would grant you the power to rewrite them.
Speak plain.
Hmm.
You will die, Kratos of Sparta.
But you called him the destroyer of fate. There must be a way to subvert destiny.
There is no destiny, Puck.
The protagonists are speechless. They do not understand.
There is
like
no
Skull.
What a throwaway line.
Shitposting.
script. Only the choices you make. That your choices are so predictable. Merely make us seem prescient.
When my son was born, shut up!
Yeah, this feels. I'll keep my opinions to myself.
Yes, yes. Let the hate flow through you.
And he did. Because you could not let him go. Because he thirsted for revenge. And because you kill gods.
But what Kratos did, it was not out of hate.
Should I bring him a crown then? He still slays gods, but now he's sad about
Oh
it.
wait, making fun of
You
their
are
own
some
game.
of your choices, nothing more. And because your choices never change, you will learn that Heimdall intends to kill your son in Asgard, and you will do what you do best. And then Ragnarok.
The skies burn, the curtains fall. Exunt omni.
And then they
I
speak
can't hear
Latin.
the voice.
Again, he
I can't hear the voice acting, so I'm just assuming that it's really
It's very
awesome.
smarmy.
It's very smarmy, yeah. They're like intentionally trying to piss you off, is clearly the direction they were given.
oof.
Yep.
But yeah, chat hates it.
He stomps away, followed closely by
All right.
Freya.
Yep. Thank you.
Skull is so adorable, it almost makes me not hate this.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so, to recap what just happened, the linear plot jerked us around for over an hour, dragging us from point A to point B to point C to be like, oh, the fates aren't here, guess we gotta try again, which is exactly the main quest line of the first part of Skyward Sword and why everybody hated that game.
Yep.
And then when you reach the fates, they tell you to fuck off, and then you do.
Yes.
So what the fuck was the point of that? Aside from adding
So,
2 hours
okay.
to the game.
Let us leave this place.
Okay.
Happily.
I'm going to speak from my perspective, not as a expert in Old Norse literature, but as a person who has played Pathologic 1, and say that I'm torn between saying that I love this and that I hate it.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Because-
Things getting more normal
Because
already.
on one hand, I'm like, stilted line delivery. Them commenting on the fact that this is a thing where your choices don't actually matter because you're playing a video game. Oh, that does remind me of Pathologic 2 and Pathologic 1. I do like those two games, but then it just makes me want to go play Pathologic 1, which I think is a sign of mental illness. So,
Yeah, that's Stockholm Syndrome, Basil. I'm worried.
yeah.
Oh, by the
Oh,
way,
here's the tree that Odin hanged himself from.
not not Yggdrasil, just a random ass tree.
I was gonna say, should it be Yggdrasil?
Yep.
Well,
But also, on your very existent bingo cards, check off the random runes on tiles, because those were attached to the news, which I guess makes sense, because that's how the runes revealed themselves to Odin. But at the same time, that's a post-medieval thing.
yeah.
By a lot.
I'm still thinking about the noose on the non-Yggdrasil.
Yeah,
I'm
that part.
trying to reconcile that.
As the characters are talking about killing Heimdall,
Yeah.
let's go back to the question of whether we like this or hate this.
Right, yeah. My biggest complaint about this game is the pacing. Like, so much of this game is good, but it does not need to be this long. If it wasn't full of filler, this could be a really tightly knit 10-hour experience, I would say. And the thing is, like, I haven't played this game. If the gameplay is really fun, that's probably fine. But all I've seen has been, like, yeah, but the thing is, like, they just keep chucking overworld enemies at you for you to mow down by the hundreds.
The God of War experience.
Yeah, which is fine. That's fine. But at the same time, like, I feel like the audacity of the characters, of the Fates being like, you see, we don't really control fate, we're just really good at knowing shit, and you guys are really predictable because you don't make choices in a linear game is like, okay, and here's the thing, I might have more spoilers than the rest of you because I did a little bit of wiki walking just to sort of figure out, like, you know, what's the deal with this one thing, does this one thing that I was suspecting might happen actually happen, so I know some stuff about the end of this game. And how that ties in with what the Fates have to say about Kratos and how his nature doesn't change and all that jazz. And I don't want to spoil, so I'm not going to, but this story is a straight line. The player never makes any choices that affect the plot. There are not multiple endings to this game.
Yeah.
Which means the Fates basically shit-talking you, giving you nothing helpful except, hey, you should probably go kill Heimdall or whatever. That's not worth an hour plus of just, you know, forced overworld, let's drive some dogs around and kill a bunch more interchangeable zombies. Yay!
Good dogs.
I like the dogs, but they didn't deserve this either. This whole section of the game doesn't add anything. There were other ways Kratos could have learned that Heimdall was the next person to kill. And he already knew your fate can't be changed, you're destined to die, etc., etc., etc.
Yeah.
This felt like it could have been more interesting. You know, this could have tied in with, like, I think if they'd done this differently, this could have been the equivalent to the retrieval of the Blades of Chaos in the previous game. Just this huge, emotionally impactful moment drawing on Kratos' past that he's tried to bury. But it's not. It feels like a waste of time. And it also feels like it's insulting you.
Well, unless that's the point. And I mean, again, this is coming from a brain-damaged pathologic player, and someone whose thesis is on failure.
Yeah.
Keep that in mind. Is that I sort of wonder if I do not think that the developers have thought this through. I am not trying to defend this game, and I have no context for it, and I'm also not playing it, which means it's less painful for me. But I sort of wonder if the kind of deliberate wasting of your time and the deliberateness of saying, here is the straight line that you're going to go on because you cannot diverge from your path, is sort of a meta commentary on the Ragnarok itself. Odin himself cannot diverge from his path. He is destined to waste his eternal time forever until the very end.
Yeah.
He's going to waste his time trying to find answers to solve the Ragnarok, and it's not going to work.
Exactly.
And there is something that could be done with that, because what that does is it sets up Kratos and Odin as incredibly direct character foils, in that they are both trying to escape their fate, but Kratos is essentially expanding his perspective, growing as a person, becoming better, and Odin is focusing in and narrowing down and using people and alienating the people who care about him.
I think the game does enough to set that exact thing up.
No, I agree. Here's the thing. Because obviously, the way that they frame that foiling dynamic is through Atreus. Kratos' relationship with Atreus and Odin's relationship with Atreus are meant to contrast each other. That's important. But specifically, the role of fate in their character arcs is a very important factor that could have been explored. But this is all we get of the fates, as far as I'm aware. Like, it's not like they turn up later to shit-talk Odin. You have to go find them, and all they do is tell you to fuck off and call you stupid for finding them. Like,
I mean, I kind of like that though. Like, maybe I'm just whipped, but I kind of love the idea that the fates are just like over you. Like,
well,
what do you matter? In the grand scheme of things, like, who gives a fuck about Kratos? Like, who doesn't matter? The Ragnarok is gonna happen and everyone's gonna die. It doesn't matter.
Right,
Like,
but if that was the angle that we were supposed to take away from it, there were better ways to frame it. It feels like
totally.
this feels like we played through the first draft, you know? Like, okay, we're gonna get Kratos from point A to point B to point C, and we're gonna have we gotta record some voice lines for the little like hallucinatory the world doesn't make sense dream sequence, and then when we get there, it'll just be a cutscene, and then Kratos is gonna leave, and the player can't go back there. Cool.
I will say part of the reason that sorry, Red, were you done?
Oh yeah, I'm done. Well, okay. I mean, I'm done for now.
The reason that I think I like this more than I dislike it, I agree, it could have been done a lot stronger. I don't want to pretend like this is perfect storytelling. There's a lot of parts of this game that are a lot stronger than this. This could have been a lot shorter. But as soon as we actually get to the hiding place of the Norns, because it's bullshit that they lead you to two wrong places and then they know you're gonna find him anyway. So like, what was the point of that? It was just more gameplay padding filler. Like, okay, like we can see past the gamey bits of it. But as soon as you actually get to where the Norns are and they start shit talking you, they say, you know, we know that you do this, this, and this. You cannot change. You cannot change. That's what they always say. That is also what Athena said in the last God of War.
Yep.
You know, oh, pretend you're this, but you cannot change. You'll always be a monster. So for Kratos, this is interesting because he's had Athena telling him this, and he's like, fuck you, you're wrong. And then when the Norns tell him this, does he trust that more? Does he trust that less because he doesn't have any backstory with the Norns? So even this idea of like, oh, you can't change, you're destined to do this forever. On one level, Kratos is like, okay, yeah, whatever, fuck you. But I like this idea because they say, like, why are you here, Kratos? You know how this ends. What are you doing here, buddy?
Yeah.
You know that you're gonna learn that Heimdall intends to kill your son in Asgard. Or he doesn't know that, but when you learn that Heimdall intends to kill your son in Asgard, you're going to go and kill him, because that's what you do. You'll always do that. Your motives might be different. This time you might be doing it for your son, but you're always going to want to do this. And I like that it has Kratos in a position where as soon as he is lost, he does the one thing that he always does, which is seek out fate. Whenever he just doesn't know what to do, whenever he's fully stuck, he seeks out fate. And then having done that, whether he fully acts on it or tries to subvert it, you know, knowing how these things go, he's Greek, he saw Oedipus on the premiere night.
Yeah.
You know?
I don't want to, actually, but in the God of War 2018, when Athena says, you will always be a monster, Kratos doesn't say, you're wrong. He says, I know, but I am your monster no longer. So, Kratos has accepted that he cannot change, which is kind of the opposite of the point you were making, unfortunately. But it's just that Kratos is like, look, I can't change what I am, but I can change who I hurt. And I think that that's a very important part of what makes him so interesting in these games, that he's just this like massive ball of, it's not even self-loathing at this point, it's like acceptance of how much he hates himself, which I think is very cool. Yeah. But when it comes to these fates being like, yeah, you can't change, you know, whatever, he's like, okay, I can't change, I already knew that, and they're saying I can't change my fate to die, so these guys are useless, fine, let's go. In character, it makes sense. From a gameplay perspective, it's inexcusable.
I have another counterpoint, which, as I'm losing to a berserker repeatedly, we'll talk about them in a moment, which is, this is basically, like, one of the most saga-like moments in this game, right? Putting on the hat, not of a brain damaged pathologic one player, but of someone who has read a lot of sagas. This is about as saga-like as it gets.
Yeah. Is this kind of idea that you can't change your fate, you don't have choices, that you have to go along on your doomed action.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Beowulf is even more illustrative of this actually than the sagas in many ways. But think about the end of Beowulf, where the dragon has devastated the countryside, and Beowulf is an old man, and he is looking at Heorot, which has been set on fire, and it's like, well, I guess I have to go take feud to this dragon, even though I know that I cannot possibly beat it, but I must. And it's the same thing that you see in sagas, where, particularly in Grethe Saga, which I know that we were talking about earlier, Red, that Grethe Saga is a wonderful saga. Skip the first 14 chapters.
Yep, easily. It's not even about Grettir at that point.
And Grettir encounters a droiger named Glaum, who is a ghost, kind of not that dissimilar from the ghost you're fighting right now, who curses him that with his vision, and says that he will see his eyes forever in the dark, and then that he will be dragged to his death. And he becomes really, really afraid of the dark, and he can't be alone anywhere, but he's also an outlaw who are destined by law, or determined by law, to always live alone. So how do you reconcile your inability to be alone with the fact that you must by law be alone? In Old Norse law, outlaws are someone you can kill on sight, no questions asked. And he goes to die in Drengi, and when he's, which is a small rocky island off the coast of Iceland, northern Iceland. It's a horrible place. When his mother sends him and her other son, her youngest son, to go and die, she tells them they're going to die. If they go to Drengi, they're not coming back.
Yeah, and they're all just like, okay.
Well, they're not even that, like, oh, it's okay. They're like, that's whatever choice do we have? I think that there is. I completely agree with what you're saying in terms of thinking about kind of gameplay and story integration not really working together. But I feel like in games generally, and something that I'm very interested when it comes to kind of Ludo narrative, is this kind of question of how do you represent the inability to make choices, or the fact that there are no choices available to you, because that's such an important part of saga storytelling.
I'd further give another saga example. I'd give a further saga example of Njal Saga, where there's this big important sequence, the burning of Njal Thorgersson's farm. Before this happens, after there's been this constant wasting of time, failed negotiations, a really long stream of trying to figure out what has to be done, right? What is the point where there is no choice? And so there's killings that go back and forth. They resolve those. There's more killings. They resolve those. Someone steals something. They resolve that. And the final stage of negotiation, Njal gives one more gift, and it blows the whole thing up. The next night, there's a dream that one of the leaders, Flosi, has. That is this weird person walks out of a side of a mountain, points to a whole bunch of Flosi's companions, and then walks back into the mountain. And he goes, right, Flosi talks to his best friend and feels like, what the fuck? His friend's like, they're all gonna die. They're super dead. But don't tell them, because then they'll chicken out. And that's worse. The rest of the saga is the consequence of not telling them. And at that point, there is no wasting time. Having a moment where they could change their nature and not doing it is the most saga-like thing this game could have done.
True. Although
Yeah.
there's someone's brought something up in the comments that we might want to address, which is how do we feel about the idea that this is meta commentary on the people who played God of War 2018 and got all pissy about the fact that Kratos isn't his old, gleefully genocidal self anymore?
Possibly. I will say on the subject of like the Kratos being his genocidal self, on the like you can't change, you'll always be a monster, you're right, but I'm her monster no longer. That is change and not change. On one axis he changes, but on one axis he doesn't. So he still kills gods, but now he's sad about it, and that's the change. His motives are different.
Yeah.
But there is a lot of like people were pissy that, oh, this Kratos is like he's soft, he's a dad, he's got emotions now, whereas the Kratos we knew from the first 3 games is Zeus, your son has returned. I bring the destruction of Olympus. You know, like that's not the same Kratos, and I think there is an interesting angle to see this as meta commentary on the first game, because the Norns are talking very much to camera with like, oh, he kills gods, but he's sad about it, in a way that no other character has done so far.
Right, but the thing is, if that's true, like if this is the angle that it's supposed to be, I almost like it even less. Because at this point we're getting into like fucking Rise of Skywalker levels of authorial insecurity.
Yeah.
Like, I absolutely have to call out the people online were mean about this. I don't know. Like, if it's an internal thing about Kratos' character arc, then I don't mind it. And again, like, my complaints are not about the story exactly. They're about how they, how they video game it up, sort of, and how they do that poorly. It's not. I think that this scene is great if it's like a show that we're following Kratos through, and he's, having this argument because, we have been watching him make these choices, but we haven't had a hand in it, and we haven't been forced to make those choices by a game that doesn't have more than one plot. If it weren't a game, this would be fine for me, I think. But the fact that they jerk you around so much and they make you play through it, and then they call you a dumbass for playing it, is like, oh, I guess I'll just stop playing your game if you're so mad about it.
This is what I would call the Spec Ops: The Line problem. It's exactly the same thing, right? Of, oh, yeah, you should not be necessarily make the player feel dumb for doing the thing that you tell them to do.
Yeah, it's like, unless it's like Stanley Parable or like Undertale Genocide Run, where it's like really making you question why you're still doing it, because the correct outcome is to stop. Like, you win Stanley Parable by putting the game down and going outside. You win the Undertale Genocide Run by stopping. But with this one, it's like you win this game by playing it through to completion for all like 50 hours. So why is the game trying to make you feel like an idiot for doing that? But if it is a meta-narrative, look at how dumb you guys look at how annoying this is, then I like it less, because now it's disrupting the gameplay, and it's not even for a good character reason.
I'll take him.
Yeah.
Just going back to the... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, please go ahead, Basil.
Just going back to the idea that Kratos is... Or, sorry, not Kratos. The Norns are commenting on kind of online reactionary responses to Kratos being characterized as not the same genocidal, kind of hyper-masculine, whatever guy that he was in the previous games. I think it's really interesting, then, the choice to have this quote-unquote softer, big air quotes, Kratos in Viking land. Like, I think it's a really, really interesting decision, particularly with the sort of image that we have of Vikings. We have this image of Vikings that are the exact same thing as Kratos in the earlier God of War games, where we have this idea that Vikings were raiding and pillaging and murdering and raping and slaving, and we're all hyped up on testosterone and fighting all the time, and et cetera, et cetera. So I don't know if I think this is kind of divorced from our comments about our conflicts even about this sort of discussion of the Norns, but I think it's worth thinking a little bit about in what ways do the God of War games uphold this idea of Viking hypermasculinity, and what ways do they challenge it?
Yeah. I love that angle.
And I'm not sure really what I'm not really sure how I feel about it. is the answer
Yeah,
for
I
me at
think,
least.
I actually think it handles that part shockingly well, all things considered. Up to and including the way they frame Freya and how well they characterize her as like essentially the actual like tortured badass warrior type that Kratos was in all previous games. Because then you get, when they're interacting with each other, you get this dynamic where he's like, you're about like 15 hours behind me in the character development, so let's talk this through. Let's talk out the feels, you know? This Kratos seems a lot more like tolerant of the things around him, which I think is very interesting. It seems like he's sort of been through it and is like, well, shit's gonna happen sometimes. We just gotta deal with it. Like, Kratos desperately does not want the plot to happen to him, because he's been trying to avoid anything happening to him for, like, his whole time in Norse land, which is very funny, but also annoying from a gameplay standpoint, because it means that your only motivation to continue playing the game is getting dragged along by the nose. Anyway, but the specific framing of Kratos as, like, sort of having to learn to be a good father, b more compassionate and less murdery overall, is very interesting, putting him in the sort of hyper macho, manly men with beards genre of action. And I think it's cool that the bad guy for the first game that you spend most of the time dealing with is Baldur, who's a dickhead, a tough guy, tattooed man with a beard who won't shut up and is terrible to women.
Yeah, it's interesting that the game says, like, see this basically, like, nearly stereotypical portrayal of, like, a super edgy, like, oh, I love everything about Viking culture, this is my heritage, white supremacist, and says, you're the bad guy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he sucks. Kratos is going to be disappointed in you and then break your neck. And then hang out with your mom, loser.
Yep. Yeah, which, brings in a lot of thoughts on, how do you make this space in their relationship, right, unfriendly to people who would not necessarily automatically realize that Baldur's the bad guy. Or that Odin is the bad guy for putting Baldur there. And I think the first game actually has some big issues with that, of not doing enough. And this game still doesn't do enough in some ways. But, right, it's difficult because the fundamental idea of this game in terms of mythological spheres just isn't something I love, because, I mean, these are interconnected world spaces with legendary material that, well, maybe not derived from each other, are definitely referring to each other and set in each other's lands. Shoutouts to our favorite Finnboga Sagarama for being set in the Roman Empire, namely Constantinople, for a good chunk of its runtime. Right, bleeds all of these legends and legendary spaces together, and when we're creating the idea that they're totally separate, that makes it really easy to deny historical diversity because they were totally separate.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's the really interesting thing about Norse mythology as well, is like Snorri's version of Norse mythology is a deeply worldly Norse mythology. Snorra Edda, which is Snorri's prose version of the Poetic Edda, is extremely centered on kind of a geography and a history that is much more interested in kind of where is Iceland's place in a global medieval world than it is
Greenland's
interested,
fake.
Except for fake Greenland, which, as we know, is a globalist conspiracy.
The old Asgard is Troy gambit that Snorri loves so much.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a very common medieval motif, the idea that the kind of original founders of a particular society are from Troy. Britain is famously founded by Trojans, obviously.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Obviously.
We have to be. We're so important and good and destined to rule the world and never ever burn to the ground.
Right, along with like 6 other countries.
Yeah.
So like it's just sort of part of the kind of material. So I completely agree with you, Adam, that I think that there is kind of a danger in confining these mythologies into their own separate spheres and not letting it be untidy and kind of blur into one another. So yeah.
You gotta overpopulate his senses.
Now, plot, we need to find a way to... we fought Heimdallr last week. He has this annoying habit of if you try and hit him, he'll just kind of duck out of the way and then slap you. Because he can see everything, and therefore can see everything coming. Obviously.
It is interesting that Kratos says Heimdall will kill Atreus in Asgard, so I have to kill him first. Whereas that's not what the Norns said. They said Heimdall intends to kill Atreus in Asgard, and you will kill him first.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that Kratos is already mishearing and misinterpreting things. You get the sense that his tunnel vision is taking over, which I think is cool.
Yeah.
To be fair to Kratos, if someone was like, this guy's planning on murdering your son, you probably wouldn't be like, well, but maybe he won't. You know, maybe I'll sort things out first. You'd probably be like, oh, he's gonna murder my son. Like, that's a level of nuance that I'm not sure Kratos is capable of right now.
Yeah. So, something to do with the ring Draupnir is going to explain how we're going to overwhelm Heimdallr and kill him.
Violence cannot prevent violence, Kratos. I truly thought you understood that.
Now, that's weird because Draupnir's a ring. This game fucks up Draupnir in the same way that everyone else fucks up Draupnir. It's not a ring, like, on your fingers. It's just, that's not what the word ring means in Old Norse. It's a torque. It's an arm ring.
Very cool.
And so instead, no, it is a finger ring in a pile of finger rings because it makes 9 copies of itself every 9th day. Add up the number of days, and that's a lot.
Yeah.
Fun fact: the ring, the word for ring in Old English and in Old Norse, boig, is also where we get the word bagel.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
This is what you have me here for. To give you things like the etymology of bagel.
We do love bagel.
Oh, I'm gonna miss one.
And 3, 2, 1, pop. See?
Oh, yep, there's your finger ring.
Yep. You know, it makes it more convenient for handling and or doing plot shenanigans with. But
I'm gonna say that that's a completely reasonable thing for them to have not known. Like,
or not cared about.
Well, the thing is, if they were working on the translations, they don't specify it's like an arm ring. They just say this is Draupnir the ring. It drops 9 copies of the ring.
No.
Yeah, but the words are different in Old Norse. Just throwing that out there.
Yeah, which makes me think that they did not use the Old Norse the Old Norse sources. They used the popularly available translations, which I will say is a reasonable thing to expect from a mostly English-speaking studio of game developers. I'm just saying this one I'm not gonna actually them too hard on.
No, this is not a big issue.
No.
It is funny that one thing here is that Peter mentions Mimir said that Draupnir went missing when he was still working for Odin, so the dwarves have had it for a century, and no one else knew.
Yep. But given that they're the ones who made the damn thing, ungifted it, I believe was their term.
Yeah, reasonable.
Which also means another example of them having to write Loki out of Norse mythology. Because this is somewhat importantly a story that is started by, contains a middling by, and is ended by Loki doing bad decisions.
Yeah, the fact that Atreus does very little in this game means that they sort of have to get a lot of mileage out of, oh, the people who wrote that down were lying, I guess.
Or just not even worrying about it, right? It's just interesting because, right, this is the story where Loki cuts off Sif's hair for reasons. The
shits and giggles. It's never explained.
Exactly. The Prose Edda provides no context. There's presumably a reason, but I don't think it's a good one.
Probably not.
And
I'll be right back. I need to fold my croissant dough one last time.
yes. And after this, I think it is Brock and Sindri that make the... It's either the Brock or Sindri or the Sons of Vivaldi that make Sif's new hair. And they're like, hey, that's cool. What if we double or nothing it by making it a competition? And so that's how we get Mjolnir. That's how we get Dreipnir. That's how we get Gungnir. That's how we get Gutlimbursti. And that's how we get Skidbladnir. Gutlimbursti being a living boar with gold made out of gold. And Skidbladnir being a boat that'll show up later.
I'm just going to answer a question in the chat before I forget. So Zoe asks, is the concept of weird related at all to the lack of choices you were talking about with the Norns? Like I was saying earlier, like weird is really weird in Old Norse literature in that fate is present, but it's never kind of personified in the same way that it is in Old English literature, where you definitely have, as Adam was talking about Njal Saga, and in the ways that you're talking in that I was talking about in the context of the sagas like Goethe Saga, you have this idea of fate being a really important part of these characters' lives, but it seems to be sort of, it seems to be used more in the context of a discussion about honor than anything else. So in Old Norse culture, there's a really, really strong, and we see this in popular cultures, adaptations of Old Norse literature, there's a really, really strong incentive to maintain honor, and kind of personal public fame. And there are particular ways in which one accumulates honor, safe, or in ones in ways that loses safe. And one of the ways you do that is, or you keep your honor, is by not backing down from conflict, from not faltering in the face of adversity. And that seems to be how fate is employed. It's employed as a way to say, I must do this, or I will die, rather than lose my honor. So that seems to be the ways in which that fate, I think, is working in the sagas, and is working kind of across Old Norse literature more generally, is that it's really intertwined with this idea of honor.
I wholeheartedly agree. It's also like weirdly complicated because for all we might be like, oh yeah, honor is obviously a big deal. There's a lot of time that it's like, oh, luck, or good. He has extraordinary good fortune. Are you sure you want to do this? And they're like, yep, I gotta because reasons. And so there's like this whole nexus of very like vaguely understood terms that are all bullying people into committing basically suicidal levels of violence. And I don't think that's a good system, I'll be honest.
People have said that that's part of the reason, and people have made this argument that this sort of strong death drive, for lack of a better word, is part of the reason that the Commonwealth exploded in the way that it did. So Iceland was an independent region for most of the Middle Ages, since its settlement in the 9th century, and then its takeover by the Norwegian king in 1262-1264. And there was a period in which things seemed to be more or less functional. But then for lots of complex socio-political reasons, which are very, very boring, there erupted this huge explosion of violence, of feudal violence.
You're saying that Jon Lofton is not the most interesting person you've ever heard about?
No, not my favorite person, I'll be honest with you. But my point is that this kind of bloody feuding that exploded in the kind of end of the 13th century, really the middle to the end of the 13th century, probably was sort of what you had to do, like what every part of your culture was telling you to do, was to engage in feud, and at a certain point you start running out of people to kill, and you start running out of people to do the killing.
And I mean, You know, overall, I'm not super persuaded by this argument in terms of the overall social state, because there's a lot of people who are not doing this and or are doing it for much more personal reasons than some grandiose sense of honor. That being said, one person in particular absolutely thought he was a literary character and acted accordingly, and that person was Snorri Sturluson.
Well, he was a literary character, frankly. He lived his life like a literary character.
Exactly. Therein lies the problem. I think you can almost, not quite, but almost single-handedly blame the fall of the Icelandic Commonwealth on Snorri, and you wouldn't be invalid for doing it. Like, that's not an indefensible take.
Read my PhD thesis. I talk about it in the introduction.
Hell yeah.
I talk about how we can blame everything on Snorri. But yeah, no, I'm not 100% persuaded by this argument either, frankly. But I do think that it is interesting to kind of always have in the back of your mind.
Agreed.
This idea of kind of death drive and honor, and the way in which they are mutually reinforcing. In terms of, and luck is really, really interesting too, heroic luck. Grettir is famously unlucky. He's ogetu. He's very unlucky. Whereas someone like Oyvind, from Oyvind and the Bear, which is a great little short story, is famously very lucky and manages to give a polar bear to the Norwegian king.
Perhaps
so, very exciting.
Perhaps a better known example of it is Leif Eriksson's epithet is the lucky. Because he is repeatedly, for a variety of reasons, actually is said to have an unusual amount of heroic luck and associated intelligent decision making. Honestly, half of it is just like decision making and like. I think he has the name after picking up Bjarni Herjolfsson, who gets shipwrecked off the coast of North America and is drifting between there and Greenland. And so it's the luck of finding someone in open ocean, but much more importantly, it's also the luck of knowing when to give up on a settlement because it just isn't working.
Yeah. I think the foresight to give up is something that is not really something that a lot of Saga characters have, unfortunately.
No.
I mean, again, like I've said in the chat, or like I've said before, like my PhD thesis is on failure, and I'm really, really interested in these moments where characters give up, and there's not very many of them. But there are these weird moments where you're like, oh, you really think that it's gonna go one direction, that they're gonna battle to the last man, that it's gonna be this really heroic moment, and then it just sort of fizzles out. This is why I work on the sagas that everyone calls bad, because they don't have these heroic moments that everyone is hoping for.
I mean, God, there's Floss. I mean, the end of Njál Saga is one of those moments.
Yeah.
But also, like, what was the one I was thinking of? Thorstein's Thautar Safstra. Where, they fight each other to a draw, and they're both like, I'm tired. You just call it a day?
That saga, or that Thautar, is another kind of genre of prose Old Norse texts. The word means loop or strand, kind of going back to what Red was saying about kind of the ways in which the fates are used to talk about storytelling and narratives. Fløytur just means loop or strand, and it's the word used for medieval short stories. And the Fløytur of Thorstein's Staffstruck is really, really awesome and wonderful, but a very, very unheroic story. How are the croissants?
They're gonna be great when I form and bake them tomorrow. The frustrating thing about croissants is that I have learned through painful experience that you really do need to let the laminated dough chill overnight before you bake them. I have at times speedrun the croissant process, where you just do all 5 folds at once, and you cut it up, and bake them. And what happens is all of the butter melts out, and the croissants fry in a delicious half-inch thick puddle of butter.
That sounds like not a croissant, but like a very good meal in and of itself.
Well, the thing is, the lamination kind of like retains, but it doesn't have that really good butter balance. But I'm typically very impatient, so I sort of have to hack my brain to like let me actually do this, which is I do croissants while I'm doing other stuff. So like I get an hour of work in, and then I have to do another fold, and then I get another hour of work in, and then another fold, and then I leave it in the fridge overnight, and then afterwards I'm like, oh hey, yeah, I should make croissants. So I spend the morning shaping them, baking them, then I have croissants to eat. It's fantastic. But if I really want croissants in the now, they don't get made properly. So anyway, so I'm looking forward to eating them in like 16 hours.
Yeah. We can bounce this. I've got good strats, maybe, possibly. Oh, never mind. I do not have good strats.
This was something I did not like about the original, or the new God of War, and actually any of the God of Wars that I played. I am so bad at video game puzzles. Like, I don't know what's wrong with me. Like, some part of my brain just shuts off the minute I have to do a puzzle in a video game. I don't know what's wrong with me, but it's literally the Skyrim matching puzzles are literally about my level. Like,
here's the thing. There's like a whole like branch of game scholarship that's devoted to like making puzzles not fucking awful. There's a video from Game Maker's Toolkit actually about the puzzles in God of War, specifically because when your brain is trained on doing combat and suddenly you have to shift into puzzles, there are essentially two kinds of players. One who will be like, oh, this is a wonderful change of pace. And one who's like, I was just focusing on combat. How do you expect me to push these dumbass blocks around?
Yeah.
And as a result, a lot of the players, about 50% of them, will get to these moments and get completely and utterly stuck. So what they do for this game, and in a lot of other games too, but aggressively in this game, is that they have the companions basically giving you all the solutions about 30 seconds after you get to the puzzle. So it sounds like these characters are just spoiling all the solutions immediately.
Yeah.
Because for anyone who likes these puzzles, it's like, wait, I hadn't even figured out what was going on yet, and you gave me the answer. But for a lot of other people, it's like, oh, thank God, I was never going to figure this thing out. Or maybe, I would bash my head against it for like 30 minutes, but it's better this way than going to a walkthrough on IGN or Polygon or what have you. So it's fascinating that the puzzles in this game are not harder than like Portal puzzles.
No.
But they jar you more because you're not in a puzzle-solving mood, and suddenly you have to solve puzzles.
That's totally.
You get into the puzzle-solving mood, and then they immediately throw a big combat encounter at you. Thank you.
You're telling me the pacing of this game is weird and perhaps bad? No way.
Nah. That sounds fake.
It can't possibly be true. This game is the best game ever created.
I will say, though, Breland says, do you think the reason the issues of story y'all experienced are because this is the last entry instead of doing a trilogy? Pacing issues aside, really like that the Norse games are a duology. Yeah. I like that a lot. A weaker and less confident developer would have split this out into 3 games, but if they had so much filler with this in just one game, splitting this up in half, oh my god, there would be no way to write a compelling endpoint to what would be God of War 2022 is when this game
It would have been intolerable. Basically, what they probably would have done is ended it with Atreus going to Asgard. They would have made it a big dramatic fight and a big dramatic breakup, and you would have gotten some time in with Atreus as an Asgardian or an Aesir or among them. And then, probably would have had to time skip it a little bit to account for the actor growing up more. And then, the next game would have been all set up for Ragnarok. And the only good thing that would have come out of that is that we might have gotten Atreus actually doing some of the stuff that Loki supposedly did.
Yeah.
Just see him fucking around in Asgard more. But no, I genuinely, I really like the fact that they chose to make this a duology. I think that was a strong choice that is not obvious, but ends up working really well, because you have the first game being a very personal story of Atreus and Kratos that's very much about them. The world around them happens, but, plot point by plot point, not a lot happens in God of War 2018.
Also,
there's like 4 things that happen the whole game.
That is Tyr's job, not mine.
the more I'm thinking about it, both the fact that this is all character-driven drama and not, you know, stuff happens drama, even though this is the end of the world, also a very Saga thing, huh?
Yeah.
The pacing,
Yeah.
Red, your pacing problems with this game feel suspiciously like those same complaints you had when talking to me about Grethe Saga.
I was right then too.
I mean, I'm not gonna say either direction on that. It's just a fun statement of doing the genre well. Is something that is having pacing issues to you. Right? Doing the tone of a saga correctly is something that very justifiably can be read as pacing issues.
Yeah, I mean, it's very subjective. Like, again, this is probably more fun if you are playing the game, because the gameplay does seem to be quite solidly, you know, it seems to feel good to do.
Yeah.
But, you know, if you're looking at it as a story that we're experiencing vicariously, it's like, well, I have some grievances.
Yeah. This is
a lot of
also,
this feels like a lot of nothing.
I think we also have to think about what the context of what the sagas are trying to do versus what God of War is trying to do. So I agree that, yeah, that there is a kind of similar pacing where, again, not very much happens in a lot of the sagas, but these sagas have a very different kind of narrative aim. So Grethe Saga, like I said earlier, you can really safely skip the first 14 chapters if you're really only interested in the story of Grettir. He only comes in around chapter 14. Same thing with Egil Saga, Egil Saga Skapa Grimsson. But the reason that these stories don't really immediately begin with the kind of hero that you're expecting and the protagonist that you're expecting is because these are fundamentally genealogies that are focused on the kind of telling the story of the original settlers to Iceland from Norway, how they got there, why they were amazing and aristocratic and awesome,
or not
what
that.
weird things happened, or not that, what weird things happened to them, how they got their land, how they made their fortune, and then kind of these narratives use these long preambles to set up some of the thematics that are going to come in when we get to our main character, or quote-unquote main character, our titular characters.
Yeah.
And it is jarring as a modern reader. I am not disputing that at all. I routinely skip my first 14 chapters of Grethe Saga whenever I reread it for pleasure, because but there is a different aim with these texts, and it's a different reader. They're not meant for us as modern readers.
Yeah, no, definitely. And that's why I think, you know, the context makes them not only more interesting, but also easier to read, because it's like, there's more to get out of it than just incredibly slowly progressing towards, you know, something that resembles an actual plot. Like the fact that, you know, I had to keep reminding myself when I was reading the Grethe Saga, like, this supposedly happened to, like, real people. So what the fuck? Like, because then you start questioning, like, all right, what about the part where he fought a troll behind a waterfall? Like, was that what is that a mythologization of? Like, how much of this should I be reading into? Like, that's an interesting question. And the fact that so much of it is just incredibly grounded, like chapters spent on legal battles about whether or not Grettir's allowed to come home, and the answer is no, because fuck him. And it's interesting. It's interesting to read, but it's not fun to read because it's not paced the way, like, our modern understanding of pacing is like written in blood, sweat, and tears in, you know, stories that didn't work. You can watch like old classic quote unquote good movies and be like, pacing on these is hot trash for some reason. And it's like, they didn't know. The movies as a medium were like 20 years old at this point, you know?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but I think it's also, I think it's not just that we've gotten, sorry, I had to grab my bag really quickly.
Of course.
It's not just a matter of, I'm going to deal with this after I finish my thought. It's not just a matter of us getting better at pacing, it's a matter of kind of what these narratives are supposed to accomplish, and also how are these texts being read and appreciated. So something that you have to keep in mind is that when a saga was being experienced, it was not being experienced in the same way that we would read a text. It was probably not being read alone, and it was probably not being read silently.
Right.
It was probably being read out loud in parts to an audience.
Let me know if I can help with that.
It's essentially 6 seasons of Xena Warrior Princess, Grettir, or Grettir Warrior Princess. Like it's a fundamentally different way of experiencing a text. You might think of it more like long television, like prestige television,
Right.
than a novel or a game or a play.
And in the same way that like reading Shakespeare does not get across why Shakespeare's so good, because you have to see it performed or perform it yourself to really get the vibe. You know, sitting down and reading all of Greta's Saga is like, wow, I could die right now and feel nothing. But hearing it, you know, played out season by season over the course of probably months, you know, given some of that pacing, probably would have been more exciting.
Yeah. I apologize to everyone who saw my long tree as I desperately tried to get my computer charger going.
Pardon me as I quickly run out to grab something, but I'll be back in just a moment.
Sounds good.
Outrageous.
Ugh.
All right. So we have plenty of time to keep going with this thought because we are in we're not even at like the next vaguely resembling plot. We are truly just trying to get through a dungeon because that's what you do. Ow. Please don't.
I think someone asked in the chat about these frogmen and how they related to Norse mythology. I think I saw on the screen that their name is Bergskrau.
Potentially, yes.
Or Bergskrau, sorry. Which
yeah.
I believe is a post-medieval folklore tradition of trolls.
Yes.
Don't quote me on that, but I don't think it's a medieval or Viking Age mythology, or at least not something that we have attestations of within the textual record.
I am with you on that. Let's check with the. Oh, please stop. Game. It's zooming. It's the cursor has decided to just start going. Which is an interesting experience and not the one I want in my video games. Let's see. Bestiary. Monster. Yeah. Bergsra. If wretches live, they become a Grim. And then if a Grim grows up, it becomes a Bergsra. Which is a rock... What was that? Like rock cruncher or something?
Yeah.
It's
a bear gets a cliff.
Yeah.
A srow, I guess, is like an onomatopoeia. I think for like a. I don't really know what srow is off the top of my head.
I'm not sure either. TBH.
I think somebody asked in the chat if there had been modern performances of the saga as they were likely to be consumed by an audience. I don't know about sagas. However, rimr, which are rhymed...
There they are.
rhymed adaptations of sagas from the kind of late Middle Ages into the post-medieval era. So kind of from 15th century into the 17th and 18th and actually 19th century as well. These rimr are still performed in Iceland. And Adam and I have a mutual friend, Peter Hunmi, who is a rimr performer. Sometimes rimr gets combined with heavy metal, which is very interesting and strange.
Yeah.
So yeah, there are contemporary rimr performances.
There also was a like in 2017, 2018, there was a theatrical production of, I want to say it was Njál Saga, that the Icelandic National Theatre Company created. That's like, it's highly experimental, not at all the sagas as how they were performed in the Middle Ages, but a very experimental version of a saga.
And there is also the amazing 1980 film Utlaugen, which I love. It's not good. It is all available for free on YouTube. Highly
Ooh,
recommend
that's
it.
how you know it's top quality.
It's an Icelandic film adaptation of Gisli Saga.
Yeah.
It's an extremely faithful film adaptation. Everyone has terrible 70s perms, even though it's the 80s.
Um,
Look, Iceland is just like 12
it's
years
just
behind on fashion. It's
totally
fine.
Iceland's
behind.
just built different, you know, I don't know what to say.
And it was nominated by the Icelandic Film Society or whatever for Iceland's film to be submitted for the Oscars that year. And for some reason, the Oscar committee did not like Utlaugen as much as I did.
What?
Yeah, Utlaugen is great. I highly recommend it. It's quite bad, but it is a very faithful adaptation. I will put the name in the Discord chat if you guys want to share it, or maybe have it as a bad movie night if you'd like.
Heck yeah.
I'm gonna have to rewatch What's Opera Doc when we're done here, because I need to remember what a good one of these looks like.
And also, right, Chad, if you're curious, the name translates to the outlaw. The saga of Gisli Sorsun is one of the 3 major outlaw sagas. So, just so you know, it's not being subtle about what it translates to. Or what it's referring
thank
to.
you. Thank you, Ulf, for that explanation. I don't really know anything about Swedish folklore. So apparently Rau comes from Swedish Rau, and then that means that Berg is in the genitive, which is why it has the S ending, so the Rau, the spirit of the Berg, the spirit of the rock.
Yep.
Okay.
Great. Checks out to me.
Good work, team.
We love people who know about modern or more modern Norwegian and Swedish folklore, because I can do like Jon Arneson, but that's about the most recent stuff I can do.
So Rimur is spelled R long I, so I with a little dash over it, M-U-R. You can find out more about Rimur via the powers of Google. I don't work on Rimur. I'm sorry.
You dabbled in Rimur very briefly. I remember you and Lee talking about it.
I can talk with Lee about a lot of things. Lee Caldwell is a colleague of ours who wrote their PhD thesis on Rimur. In terms of Utlaugen, I can spell out the name of this movie for you. It is long U. So U with a little dash over it. T-L-A-G-I-N-N. Or just type in Outlaw 1981, and you will get it. It's a pretty amazing film.
Love to see it.
They seem surprised.
Yeah, I don't remember what we were talking about before. I was talking about Utlaugen.
Pacing.
Pacing, yeah. Utlaugen has pacing problems because it's a very faithful adaptation of Gisli Saga. So it is one of those things that you do encounter with these adaptations. I think that was also one of my complaints about the Norsemen, and I know that Adam and I differ in this regard, which is that I didn't really like the Norsemen, and I've liked Robert Eggers' other films, and in many ways this feels like a film that should be like made for me. But I felt like it's a good adaptation of the sagas, but the sagas are not very well suited for the media of film.
No, I'm actually like increasingly on the same page as you, TBH. Right, like there's a lot to commend to that film, but it is also like really struggles in a lot of places.
Maybe a saga would work well adapted as a TV show.
Yeah.
6 seasons and a movie. The entire Adventures of Grettir.
See, that's what I would pitch if anyone came up to me and was like, "Hey, I've got $10 million. You can make anything you want. Here's Grettir Saga. Let's go."
I think I would be happy that existed and never ever watch it.
I think perhaps the best version of adapting a saga for television would be like a Samurai Jack style animated kind of thing, where each episode is very short because each of the little bits in the saga are, relatively speaking, fairly confined and episodic. Where like, do you need to tell this in 60 minutes for TV, or can you do it in like 15?
Honestly, that would be perfect because, like, just like with Samurai Jack, with an Icelandic saga, you never know what you're going to get chapter to chapter. It's like some of them are just like, and then Grettir couch surfed for 6 months, and then it's like, and then he smoked the troll counter and dove behind the waterfall and ripped off her arm. It's like, whoa, wow. And with Samurai Jack, one episode might be like, Jack helps out some dogs, and the next one is like, Jack is hunted by zombies for 22 of the most frantic minutes you're gonna live through.
Yeah, the tone is weird in sagas, as is the tone is weird in Samurai Jack too. Actually,
Yeah. Gendy loves some weird tone shit.
The tone is weird because it moves really quickly from comic to tragic, rapid. Like within the space of the same chapter, like Blue was saying, like these episodes that happen in the sagas are really, really short. So you'll hear about like, you'll have like a whole little section on dick jokes, and then you'll have a fight with some trolls, and then you'll have a really, really hardcore, detail-oriented legal scene. And it's just boom, 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 right after each other. So it's really generically weird and tonally weird, and you sort of feel like you're getting whiplash through it. It's very strange. So it's just very weird. I don't think any film adaptation has successfully captured that.
No. And right, as a like with the Norseman as an example, I think even in my first review I said, right, there was one moment where if this was an actual saga, right, murder someone at a ball game. All right, I know what we're doing for the next 30 chapters here, folks. Yeah. The movie does not do that. It's probably to the movie's credit that it doesn't do that. But for its claims of like being a saga, like, oh yes, this is Amlo the Saga. This is an adaptation of a 17th century Icelandic version of Hamlet.
Yeah.
It invents a ballgame, creates a legal feud, and then doesn't do anything with it.
Oh, disgraceful.
I know.
A saga that doesn't take the most advantage of a legal feud?
You understand my pain, Red. I'm not sure you realize that it's pain, but you understand something.
It's so funny to me that my ideal adaptation of the Saga of Grettir would probably be your worst nightmare. Well, left out all the exciting thing stuff. Thing, technical term, thing.
Thing.
Real quick, meta note, I will have to head out after this next little section that we're about to see.
This story cutscene is, I think, the last one we're going to do. We're going to do this. We're going to showcase the spear. I'm going to say, if you want more spear, tune in 2 weeks from now.
Haha.
Because we've got nothing if not a little bit more random nonsense. Carry a thing a couple of times and kill a bird.
Oh.
Yeah, so it's probably like a roughly 4-minute long cutscene because this gear is going to be broken for no discernible reason. They could have just not.
It does not work.
I didn't like the description of goosebumps on my bunions.
Yeah.
Didn't like that.
Yeah,
wasn't a fan.
That's just how Brock is.
I didn't like it.
That's fair.
I'm just throwing it out there. Didn't like it.
So gross.
Oh,
but I love him.
Yep. A thing from chat. Do you want to talk about how they're explaining Dwarven magic and crafting items for being not the thing itself, but the nature of the thing? It's odd. I don't. Like, I don't.
Yes, I don't know what that means.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But like, it's basically it's taking those impossible things to form Gleipnir, and saying, right, that it doesn't matter that those things aren't. I mean, they are like. The beard of a woman is not, in fact, as spicy of an impossible object as the Old Norse Eddas really wanted to be. Ludohistory says trans rights.
Yeah, of course.
Trans rights.
Trans rights.
Exactly.
Yeah, I don't really. Crafting is not really. It's really interesting. I actually have had a friend who wrote his master's thesis on crafting in the sagas. It's really interesting that there's actually remarkably little attention paid to how things are made in the sagas. You kind of get references to, oh, this was made out of this metal, and then it kind of moves on. You sometimes get object histories where you have kind of who owned something and how badass they were. But you tend not to have very like intense discussions of how things were made.
Yeah.
So that's something that's I think is very interesting, because I think we have this idea that it should be really ingrained within these texts, but it's just not as present as you might expect.
Exactly, right? There's like Gleipnir, right? The chain to bind the Fenris wolf.
Right.
And that really matters how it's made, because the point is that it's way too strong to do anything. And there's the forging of Sigurd's sword Gram. And that's super intense because he breaks 2 previous swords, like Fenrir breaks 2 previous chains. I'm noticing a pattern here. And there's cases of like going into a lot of detail of reforging in order to preserve an object history or in some way sort of reactivate something spooky or bad about the weapon. And past that, who owned the weapon matters way more than who made it.
Yeah. Yeah, and way more.
Like, right, Tyrvingr is a problem because it is Angantyr's sword, not because someone put a curse on it. It's almost like it's cursed because it's attached to Angantyr, even though Angantyr also died to make sure that the curse wouldn't spread to anyone. He had the sword buried with him on the island of Samsa, so that no one could... Tyrving's curse would not spread. So it's cursed before him, but it's also cursed because of him. And it's this really, really odd interplay that, like, the idea of create a new weapon, get the gameplay, doesn't really fit into. I think you can tell that based on who they're having do the forging here. I guess, right, there are magic smiths in Old Norse. I would note, what's his name? Oh, God, Wayland. Wayland.
Yeah. Völundr.
Thank you. I was like, I blanked on the Old Norse. I can do the Frankish or the English. What's wrong? This is not how I do. But right, he's like the classic example of a Lord of Elves, super spooky smith, horrible person, daedalus archetype. There's also sea spirits. Like, Raun is who I assumed this was when I saw the trailers. I assumed this was the goddess Raun. No, turns out it's a mermaid.
Just some other fish lady.
Right, this is the mermaid that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would have thought, like you, Adam, that this was one of the many kind of sea spirits that gets mentioned, particularly in poetic kennings. You have these ideas that there are these ladies in the sea and these sea goddesses. They get frequently mentioned, particularly in reference to gold. But since this character is just kind of a mermaid, I don't really know if she's supposed to be a specific reference to anything.
The game specifically says mermaid, so I'm going to go with no.
If you want to stretch it, Lady of the Lake.
Yeah.
In terms of spooky underwater lady passing out magic weapons. The idea that the lady...
Mimir talks about Nimue. That's called out,
Yeah, so the idea that the Lady of the Lake is a smith is I'd say modern concept, because normally it's just like, oh yeah, spooky women lying around in ponds, classic stuff.
Distributing swords is a perfectly sound basis for government.
Yeah, you've been granted the sword / the kingdom by some deity or whatever. That's normal. But the idea that the Lady of the Lake is a smith who crafts those weapons is I'd say modern idea that makes her a little more interesting, rather than just she's somebody who gives you stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Quick, we saw the Omega being drawn out of Kratos' blood, which is metal as hell. What was the I'd imagine the rune that came after it?
It's the letter K, but sideways.
So it's K for Kratos, but he's taking a nap.
Exactly.
Great. Love it.
Okay.
Yeah,
I can live with that.
Like...
not as exciting as we might hope.
No
Yeah.
complaints here.
It's monogrammed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Truly.
She turned his name into a scarf.
And
Yeah.
so he knows that it's his.
God, I
Otherwise,
love
he
the
might
spear
forget.
so much.
It's the equivalent of a luggage tag.
The spear
exactly.
is so cool. Conceptually, actually, hold on, I'll let the cutscene play out.
Are you,
Character moments.
hello?
I thought it was a shovel at it for a second in the scene. I was like, why is he holding a shovel all of a sudden?
Agilaz points out that spells ook.
Mermaids don't speak to
And
Bodies. They speak to a part of our soul.
reject majority, embrace monkey.
Oh boy.
That feels about right. And
Oh, the thing with Brock and the soul. No.
no.
Damn it, Sindri!
Wait,
you
what?
lying
So Brock.
This is lore from earlier.
Yeah. In the accident that fucks up Mjolnir, I think Brock died instead of just got stung by a gadfly. Sindri brought him back to life, which is not how that's supposed to work.
fucked off into the
Yeah.
And Sindri confides in us that that he brought Brock most of the way back, but a piece of Brock's soul was missing, and he was like, "Don't tell Brock. Brock doesn't know how bad the accident was, and he doesn't know that I had to go to the underworld to get him back."
This is a very sweet moment.
Aww.
wouldn't mean squat.
It is the nature
Aww.
that matters, not its form.
Hold
He
on.
doesn't have his soul bits.
And here Kratos gets it.
All right.
Mm.
May this weapon strike true. May it be wielded with wisdom. May it be put down when its job is done.
Let us return
Oh.
home.
I really like this because it shows Kratos becoming more wise and understanding, in addition to, you know, seeing a little bit of Kratos getting back on his bullshit. He's
Yeah.
still a different person.
Yeah.
He would not have done this. Even earlier in this game, he wouldn't
Yeah.
have done this.
This is a Kratos who goes out of his way to be compassionate towards people, which is very new for him, and I wholeheartedly approve. Because this is what we were yelling at him to do all through the last game, where it was like the talk to your son challenge, and he was just like, nope, absolutely not.
So this spear is pretty fun, as it turns out.
I love this spear.
Not only is it a good moveset, it's got this fun ability where you can just fling it, and 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 fling it
It
again.
makes sense because
then-
you can just keep throwing spears, and since it's without there, you can just have more spears.
Infinite spear.
Think. And then you make them all explode at the same time, and it does big damage.
I do love spears.
Yeah?
I love all the infinite spears.
We're just gonna kill off these folks so I can actually get to a save point, and then it's gonna be done. Wow, that guy got rolled.
He got.
Oh, they
So-
keep coming. They really want you to get used to using Drathnia.
Yeah, this is not as emotionally impactful as Kratos getting the blades, because that scene had
That
so
is an
much.
intense scene.
Yeah, I don't know if anything in this game will be able to touch that, but I haven't finished it yet, so we'll see. But that was a huge moment. Like, the entirety of God of War 2018 existed to facilitate that
Yeah.
scene.
Totally.
It's all leading up to that, yeah.
There's no chance it could have competed with that, but it serves a similar purpose within the narrative of what does it mean when Kratos gets a new weapon. I really like this scene because it shows how he has become better, the ways in which he still needs to grow, and also how going back to this primordial, like, Spartan part of him. So he says the spear is the first weapon of every Spartan, that he's reaching into this part of himself that he didn't even get when he picked up the blades, because it's not it's not just, oh, this is, specific to me. The nature of the spear being this kind of weapon has an intrinsic meaning for Kratos, which I think is very cool.
Yeah. Awesome. However, I believe there we are actually out of time, so we'll leave it right here with this very lovely diving bell. And we shall call it there. So, firstly, Basil, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, no, thank you for having me.
Absolute delight.
Yeah.
Overall, what is your impression from your brief glimpse into the weird nonsense that is God of War Ragnarok?
Yeah, I mean, well, thank you guys so much for having me. This was really, really lovely. Yeah, I mean, it makes me want to play it more than anything else. It really makes me want to get the spear earlier. I know there's an emotional payoff, but it looks just like so much more fun. We're just like, come on, give me the spear.
Actually,
but no,
I prefer the blades.
Oh, heresy. No, this was super fun. It really did spark a lot of interesting kind of conversation for me about kind of in what way this adaptation is doing things differently, in what ways there are echoes here of the material that I work on, and in what way does the material that I work on kind of speak to this game, and what way is there reciprocity between them.
Yeah.
So yeah, this was really, really interesting for me.
Yeah, this was a very fun conversation.
Yeah, awesome. As we wrap up, chat, do make sure you hit that follow button, because there's a lot of streams coming up, and if you enjoyed this, you're going to enjoy everything else we're doing, so do make sure you hit that follow button to be notified what those were. And if you did like it, do consider hitting that subscribe button to help support the channel. Make sure other stuff like that will continue to happen. So, scheduling things, there is no God of War Ragnarok next week. On the grounds of Red and Blue are going to be on vacation.
Yep.
So, we're going to respect that and have no stream of that, but we will have a guest on anyway. We'll be playing Pentiment with a book historian, so if you like that conversation in the middle about, preservation, manuscript copies, the whole digression into the terrible world of Icelandic manuscripts, you'll enjoy that conversation with Ali Elvis about Pentiment and early print over there. But we will be back February 11th, and our next guest is going to be Katie Beard from the University of Oxford, who is an archaeologist working in Old Norse religion, doing phenomenally cool interdisciplinary work, and creating data sets that we have desperately needed for a very long time. So I am unbelievably excited to have her on, and I hope you will all, if nothing else, join us then. But yes, one final round of applause for Red and Blue and Basil, all of our guests. It is a delight, as always, to have you all around. And yeah, chat, it was lovely to have you all here too. And until next time we see you, I hope you all have a good evening, alright? Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.